All
Awesome.
right.
Jonathan.
All right. Can we just do like a
Jonatelia.
quick sound check because I might have to recalibrate you a little bit.
Yep. So testing 1, 2, 3. My name's Jonathan Rogers, and I'm the game director of Path of Exile 2.
Okay, let's turn you up a little bit higher. Uh, Hopefully that will work.
I think this microphone just has really low gain or something like that.
Sounds good? Okay. Well, chat gave me the approval, so we have nothing to worry about.
Awesome.
All right, so you did your little introduction there. That's great. So just so everyone is kind of on the same page, this is Jonathan Rogers. He's one of the directors for PoE2, and you've been quite busy doing a round of interviews with many people at many events, spreading the word about the features in the upcoming game that many of us are dying to try. So we did an interview at ExileCon. There's been a few announcements since, but I've noticed that you've actually been really active on the Path of Exile 2 subreddit, answering questions of just about anyone that has one for you. It's been kind of difficult for me to kind of compile all that information, so maybe I'm going to ask a question that has been asked already. My goal is to ask new questions. It's just a very, very difficult task because the information isn't really like there's a wiki, but even the wiki has some info wrong. Like I actually had a question about the crafting bench being removed, but apparently you've actually addressed that recently on Reddit. So again, and of course with all of this information, with the game still being in development, I hope people understand that you'll just be giving your best answer from what you can share with us, and nothing is final and all that for the disclaimers. Okay, great. So I wanted to start with a round of the questions that I kind of put together. And then I have a number of questions that I saw unanswered on Reddit, on actually just a few YouTube videos. I pulled some questions from chat, and we will pull further questions from chat as we go throughout the segment. But yeah, so it should be a pretty good segment. So first, I kind of wanted to dive and talk a little bit about the last trailer that you had, which was the Mercenary trailer, in that you announced that you have WASD movement. And I tried to kind of imagine this, like, you know, how I would play with it. It feels like I would, a lot of the time, not want to go exactly right or exactly left or exactly up or exactly down. And with the keyboard, it's maybe a little bit difficult to actually combine that. Now, I know some people really wanted this feature, so you're bringing it to them. But I have to imagine, is this more tailored for like a controller-style gameplay?
So that wasn't our initial thinking. It was just when I was, trying out the mercenary. So this had been suggested in our studio a long time ago. To be clear, right? Like, there's people have been saying, "Hey, maybe we should do this for a while," and I was kind of always on the idea that this is something we should try, but it never was kind of like the right moment to do it because it is quite a complicated, thing to actually fully pull off.
This question alone could be perceived as like an attack on a PoE developer because of how console is just this big boogeyman. It's already starting off hot, even though it's just a console. It's not a big deal.
And then when we were doing mercenary stuff, I was kind of like, okay, we have some of the preconditions we needed to actually to go and try it. So the other thing as well, of course, is like people in the community have been keen for ages. So then I was just like, you know what, let's give it a shot. And I wouldn't say that controller was really the first thing on my mind. But I mean, obviously the improvements we make, I'm sure, will benefit controller. But it really was just like how can I make this class feel good? And kind of generally my feeling is that, whatever it takes to make the combat feel good is what we will try. It's kind of just one of those things that happen that way. I don't think that the limitation of having only 8 directions with WASD is particularly a problem in practice. It seems to kind of just be fine, just from me playing anyway. That hasn't really been an issue, and because the character always sort of looks towards where your mouse is, it doesn't honestly even really feel like 8-directional movement because the character can technically kind of walk in any direction relative to where they're facing. So you end up kind of just completely forgetting the fact that it's actually 8-directional, and just kind of works.
Well, since you have tried it, and I guess you're probably one of the only ones who has tried it, are you a convert? Are you going to be a WASD enjoyer moving forward in PoE2?
I'm pretty sure I am. Yes, I was actually very skeptical outside of range. Like my first, when we were talking about it, I was like, okay, this is going to be a thing for range. I don't think melee is going to be that great. And actually, the reason why I thought that is there was this game. Now, what was it called? I don't think it ever actually released. It was in beta. It might have been called like Pagan Online or something like that.
Yeah.
From ages ago, and they had WASD movement in an action RPG. And
Kripp knows. I played that game. I really quite liked that game. Everybody was like, "What is this mobile bullshit?" That was a nice game, actually.
I thought that
like
the
really
movement
early.
felt really terrible. The combat felt terrible. And so I was kind of imagining that we would have the same problem with our melee. But then what I found was when I actually tried that out, is that it actually felt really good. And I think the reason is because of the step attack stuff we have. What that means basically is that when you attack, we have different animations depending on whether you're moving at the time, and also depending on whether there's a monster that's like where the monster is relative
Come
to you.
on, bro.
So we've got animations of the character sort of stepping forward, and the key thing we're trying to do there is to make it so that you never lose momentum on your character. So it feels really bad if your character just kind of comes to a stop and then attacks.
Yeah.
And so by adding these extra animations, it allows us to make the character feel like they're kind of flowing forward and then going into the attack. So because we have those, I think it actually drastically improves how melee combat feels with WASD, and I actually am a fan of it. I think it feels.
The things that Jonathan is referencing heavily reminds me of the combat from games like Battle Right. Because in Battle Right, that's exactly how it felt like. That even though you had WASD movement, your character was like facing towards the cursor, and actually felt really, really nice. I can totally see this making sense for this as well. I'm feeling really, really good. I've never really been a enjoyer of that, and I don't think I'm gonna be playing that for like the normal game because there's just too many buttons to press in PoE. It's like it makes all the other buttons so much more annoying, and there's just not gonna be enough. But then maybe I'm gonna like move more stuff over to my mouse than use WASD. Just move everything from my keyboard to my mouse, and then that way that's gonna feel like I'm not just this like super keyboard intensive. Because whenever I do have issues in my hand or whatever in PoE, it's always with the keyboard. But then again, that hasn't really been happening since the flasks have been like redone, right? You played WoW, you love buttons. I like buttons, but in WoW you have 1.5 seconds to press it. In PoE you press everything all at the same time, so makes a pretty big difference. But I've definitely played games where the system worked and it was pretty good, and from what we've seen so far from the trailers, it looks very, very promising. Even if I only use it on the mercenary, which by the way looks sick.
Feels pretty damn good.
Well, I guess I'll have to give it a try. I mean, I was
Yeah.
skeptical as well, but on your recommendation, I guess more of us will perhaps be more open-minded on it. Now, since you mentioned there's like a more of an active flow of combat, the mercenary also has, in addition to the instant attacks, something that kind of caught my eye was the attacks while moving.
Correct.
Now, the closest thing we have to this is some form of cyclone or cyclone triggering other skills in Path of Exile 1. And with cyclone actually being a pretty poor skill otherwise, it still has this mainstay in the game just because it can be used while moving. Is this going to be like a full attack while moving, or is it like cyclone-ish where you have certain movement?
I'm surprised that Kripp would say this, because every single little bit of combat in PoE2 is something that moves your character. It's the same concept as it was in Lost Ark, and I thought it flows really well, especially on the monk when I played that, and it looked pretty good even on things like sorcerers that isn't supposed to have a whole lot of mobility. But now he's like only referencing cyclone, I guess to make it familiar to the audience, because yeah, that's like a completely different type of movement for sure. But yeah, I really like that system where any ability repositions you in some way. Because for Cyclone, it's just a matter of like, oh, Cyclone OP or Cyclone crap. But that mechanic is just always there. And it can enhance the ability as long as they don't gimp the damage too much. And you have to take it into account when you're balancing it. So now they're going to have to do that for just about every ability too. So Sork has a cloud thing. I mean, even certain abilities on Sork, like jump you back. A lot of the caster stuff that we've seen so far moves you backwards, while a lot of the melee things move you forward while attacking. And then it seems like, yeah, for the mercenary, you're just able to do whatever you want, you know? So
penalties? Like, is there something you can elaborate on that? And
So
maybe if this is something more than just what the mercenary will have?
yeah, so
aim.
on rapid shot in particular, basically you just get a 50% move penalty while you're doing it. So just whatever your movement speed is, it'll be halved during rapid shot, and that sort of
WSD.
tends to feel pretty
And you
reasonable.
think that's a lot of buttons.
This is something that I'm keen to do more of with other skills in the game. I think it actually makes the pace of combat feel faster when you can sort of begin attacking before you arrive at your next pack.
If you've ever played WoW, you'll understand this, that there's not always a situation in which you're able to move in a direction and press the button on that direction of the keyboard. But in WoW, you've got solutions to that. I don't know if in PoE that's going to be the case. So in WoW, you can control your camera and you can control your strafe movement while holding down your mouse buttons, and that allows you to do that. Or you can jump into that direction to then perform an action while you're mid-flight, and then you're able to press a button, and that allows you to press the button that otherwise you wouldn't really have access to because maybe you're already using your little finger and now you want to click Q, but you're clicking A, so now you got to click Q with like your W finger or something. Instead of being weird like that. But maybe with the dodge roll and everything, maybe that's going to feel pretty good as well. So I can definitely see scenarios like that where WASD would strictly just be worse unless you reposition yourself around the fact that you're about to use an ability on a button that you would otherwise be pressing for movement.
Just sort of otherwise having something to do while you're retreating. So I kind of quite like the feel of that, and so I'd like to do some of that as well. But I don't want to make it to the point where every skill you can just do while moving, because I think that results in very floaty combat that I don't really like. So in particular for melee, you kind of have to make sure you're splitting the difference a little bit of where you need to make sure, like what I think can be good is that you can kind of ease into, like you start an attack, and during the start of that attack, you've kind of got movement that can be controlled, and then there's kind of a part where the movement control you have tones down to potentially 0 for at least a little while, and then back into having movement again towards the end, and that kind of thing can kind of allow you to have like the feeling of you're still able to do a lot of control even in melee. But also I think for other ranged classes as well, it can be good to have just a few options. Not necessarily a lot of options, but at least a few options that allow you to be done while moving. There's just certain things I think that can feel really good from that. And so we have been experimenting with other classes and other skills as well. Like we think there are certain skills that can really benefit from that kind of thing. Yeah, it's definitely something I want to do more of.
So I kind of wanted to ask this later, but I'll jump to it now since you've touched upon it. One thing that I feel isn't super cut and dry in the presentations for the classes is what is attributed to the class and what is attributed to the skill. Because people, when they're seeing Path of Exile 2, they often forget that I hope it's still true anyway, that skill gems are just skill gems and can be used by any class. So the idea of attacking while moving when watching like the Mercenary trailer, I guess the viewer doesn't know for sure if it's something that the Mercenary gets or if it's something that's attributed to the skill.
Right. So the only thing that the classes actually technically get is the ascendancy classes that belong specifically to them, plus the starting position in the tree, right? So, and that's still true in PoE2. It's just that whenever we're presenting like content, especially when we've got like an audience we expect to have a lot of new players in, we kind of tend to want to keep to the stereotypes and kind of not like go into that other side of things too much, because I think it just confuses the issues. And really, when you're presenting a class to someone, what you're kind of presenting them is some kind of vision for what type of a character they might want to be. And so that tends to be what we focus on. But of course, I mean, at the end of the day, like it is still very much my preference to have everything be as much as possible, like have interesting combos from other stuff. And we still have that very much like Magic the Gathering style.
This makes sense to me too, because during the presentation, especially Jonathan would say things like monk ability. And then we were like, wait, so is this a monk ability or do you have the freedom? So I guess by not confusing everybody else, you're confusing PoE players. So this is something worth clarifying for sure. But yeah, everything is like fully freedom as far as I know.
Style idea of, hey, you can splash to another color. There's other, like use things off attribute, that kind of stuff. It's still very important to me. So yeah, like absolutely you can use all of those things are part of the skill and not part of the class.
Another aspect to this was to the Mercenary trailer that I was quite interested in. So again, we don't know how much of it has to do with the general gameplay, but in the Mercenary trailer, when I mean, people should watch it, but when the Mercenary takes on the boss at the end of the trailer, the pacing of the boss fight is, I believe, he's kind of trying to dodge attacks. He's like debuffing the boss, and then when the boss gets to about like 30, it just dies super quick. And I'm guessing it's because he's stacking up all these debuffs throughout the fight. Is this something more tailored towards the Mercenary, or is this kind of how you envision combat across the board?
So generally speaking, we like what I kind of, I guess the feeling I like to try and get is that you've got some kind of way to do really large amounts of damage, but you can't always necessarily perfectly execute that because of what the boss is doing. So in that particular thing, it wasn't actually that there were debuffs on the boss. I just managed to execute a perfect. So the combo I was using there was you use incendiary rapid shot, which builds up like heat on your crossbow.
Hold up.
And then with that, then when you fire a grenade, the grenades get extra fire damage on them based on how much heat there was on the crossbow. And then you can then use incendiary power shot to detonate those grenades. So I just kind of managed to get all the grenades in the right place and get the like the maximum amount of heat on my crossbow at the time at that exact moment. And that's why I did like a really large amount of damage right at the end there. But in order to be able to get that, you need to be able to use rapid shot for enough time without having interruption to build up the heat and that kind of thing. So it's just a matter of kind of getting that sorted out. I think there also might have been something to do with the baby going on there.
Baby.
I can't remember the exact thing around that, but the bosses can go down very quickly if you know how to execute. And actually, an interesting thing with that is that the first time with the mercenary setup that we had for that trailer that I played the boss, that I killed it. It actually took me 5 minutes. And I said to Mark, hey, man, what's up with this boss fight? Like, that's taking way too long. Like, what are we doing here? And he's like, what are you talking about? It takes me like 1 minute at most. Like, you must be terrible. And then I tried it again immediately. And the next time I played it, it took me 2 minutes without like me really realizing that I had particularly learned anything. So it actually turns out that it doesn't actually take long to learn the mechanics of the boss. And once you know them, the degree of increase in damage you can deal is so much higher. And that's because once you've learned the mechanics of the boss isn't disrupting you quite as much because you kind of know what to expect. And that allows you to kind of build up those various combos that let you execute large amounts of damage. So
if PoE is too slow for you,
so now, of course, like it's actually another case I had of that was the blind beast. I was doing this demo with the druid and the blind beast just again and again and again and again. At the beginning, I was taking me like 3, 4, 5 minutes to kill that boss fight, and then by the time that I actually recorded the one that I think went online, it was done in like freaking 30 seconds or something like that. And it's literally just from playing the boss again and again. So it is sort of impressive how learning the mechanics does actually make you better at the game.
As a follow-up question, since you mentioned that this idea of figuring out where the DPS wins.
Dude, even that, like what he just said, it's crazy because people don't actually realize this. Like that is the crazy part. I feel like now with ban around and people who actually know how to play the game, it's a little bit different than what it was before. But have you guys heard the whole like PoE is not a skill game thing for just years on years of people going around, oh, there's no skill in PoE. It's like, yeah, why don't you go and win a gauntlet? It's not even as much of a time sink anymore. It's just really hard, dude. But it's so shameful that you even have to talk about this, Because the PoE players, it's such a... Like, but I watched Zizarian do a demo and he didn't kill every boss instantly. Bad game. Oh my goodness.
Windows R and being able to properly execute your combos, resulting in like multiples more damage. Is that perhaps something that might be a bit difficult to tune with multiplayer? Like if you had like a 2-player party and you just had a really tanky friend keeping the boss perfectly still, wouldn't that in a sense make it much easier?
It can do, but there are various factors. So a lot of the crowd control type mechanics have things built. So for example, freeze, right? If you freeze a boss, then the next freeze takes longer. That's like a thing that kind of cools off over time. But effectively, like the more party members you have, there's kind of this like the various systems that work sort of like how poise works all respond to that. So that kind of means that someone sitting there stunning the monster is gonna, if you've got like multiple people doing that, it's going to get harder to sort of crowd control the boss over time. And then it should sort of come out to be relatively similar once you've reached the steady state, as it were, versus having a single player. Once you take into account the amount of increase in life and all that other sort of stuff. So we kind of have to get that tuned exactly right, which I can't say we've done a huge amount of tuning so far on, honestly, because we still need to do a bunch of work there. But ideally, the intention is kind of get it to the point where it sort of feels a little bit similar. But of course, there has to be room for synergy between between characters, right? And we definitely build that in as well. But
the stun
it
pose
will.
was apparently
Ideally, you're
wrong.
not just going to completely trivialize the boss just because you've got a couple of extra players in your party. It's still intended. I mean, we've always striven for like it's just as good in single player as it is in multiplayer, like making sure the balance of that is there.
All right. Now, this is kind of where I meant to ask the question, but I guess I'll elaborate. I was still really curious what pushes a skill and how much of a role the ascendancies have to do with it. Again, we've seen the druid interpreted in other games where it is very much the class. That is, like, in other games, there's no other shape-shifting class. If you want to play a shapeshifter, you play the druid. Now, in PoE2, I imagine the shape-shifting part is a skill gem that other classes can use. So what makes the druid more of a druid? How much does the ascendancy have to do with it? Is it kind of in a way where it's like PoE1, where they're just slightly better at it?
So when we're doing ascendancy classes as well, it's another one of those
yesterday.
cases where we try to make it so that the ascendancy classes can be relevant for builds even when you wouldn't think so. So like what we try to do is like, you got an ascendancy class. If you look at it and what it's called and what it obviously looks like it should be doing, it is clearly going to be good at doing, what you expect the ascendancy class is going to be doing. But at the same time, we try to sort of word all the stats so that they don't technically require that you're actually using shapeshift forms, for example. They just happen to be very good at the things that shapeshift forms happen to do, and you sort of look at it that way. But we do want to make it so that absolutely you should be able to play, a shapeshifting duelist or something like that. It can be something that we want to have scope for, even if it isn't necessarily common or the most obvious thing to do. It is something we've always, like to try and make it so you can do that. You know what I mean?
All right.
Yeah, but then you run into the problem of everything being champion, or like the problem that we're having now, where every character kind of should be using specters. It's tricky. Where do you find the balance for something like that? I feel like keeping the druids mostly druiding would probably be a good long-term call if they don't want to be rebalancing this every little bit, because that's actually the case for even games like Diablo 2, where just the druid can shapeshift, but you can point out the differences between different skill trees. And even then, if you're playing hardcore, you're a summoner, not a shapeshifting, right? But you would still be shapeshifting because you still want the defensive attributes. And then you just summon all your stuff and you shapeshift and you're just chilling, running around doing nothing, because you just get it's just always going to be better than your human form. So something like this is going to be, I don't envy them on this one at all.
So you guys put out the date for the PoE2 beta. I believe it's in early June, and this is going to be a pretty big milestone. I kind of wanted to ask a pretty broad and general question, and I have no idea what to expect for a reply because I'm sure there's still a lot of things in the work. But what can people expect out of this beta? Like, are we going to see the whole game up until the point where it's developed, or are we just going to have kind of like a shareware limited act version like we've seen from more recent titles?
So the plan is the whole game, but obviously, we're not necessarily going to finish everything. I don't think that the entire end game will be there. Like, we're sort of planning probably around like 60 maps as like a sort of starting point for the end game.
Jeez.
There will be a couple of other in-game systems in there as well, but I obviously don't really want to talk too much about them right now. We really do need to make sure that it's the whole campaign at the very least, and maps as well, just so that we can actually do progression testing. Because if we can't test the whole game, we're kind of not really learning anything on that economic front. And I think that is one of the more important things we can get out of the beta, and making sure that there's nothing too kind of like I don't know, like nothing that's like breaking the game too hard, because during beta, obviously once you're out of beta, right, like we can never remove items or really, like they have to exist forever at that point, right? So we want to make sure that everything's good there, but making sure that the progression is good and all that stuff really just requires the whole game to kind of be there. So yeah, it won't be like all content, but it will be.
That's like Mission Impossible,
especially not an end game, but it will be a
PoE?
very sizable amount of it, and there might be like a couple of classes that we can't initially do. I'm hoping we can do all of them, but we'll sort of see where we get to with that. But it should be most of them at the very least. And yeah, I honestly, like, I should hope that anyone who's in the beta would see it as a game that is like fully, like, has full quality and as big or bigger than any other kind of action RPG title that you would get.
Well, that's great. Is there some things that PoE2 is tackling differently than PoE1 to kind of grab the attention of some prospective players?
So I think that, like, this is kind of one of those really complicated ones because
the
it is
answer is
very
no.
important to us that we never dumb the game down to the extent that you won't be able to do all the interesting stuff that we're known for. But at the same time, we do obviously understand the fact that we're known as a very complicated game, and I think it's sort of interesting because there are certain things about that. Like, so I've actually been talking a lot recently with people on the team about this and like what we can do to kind of improve things. And I think there's kind of a mix of factors. So on the one hand, you've got stuff that we've already kind of like announced that how we're fixing it. Stuff like this, the way the skill system works, I think is just like way better for new players. This kind of thing is just straight up improvement. But I think that there are things like I mean, there was a recent conversation on Reddit as well about the skill tree and what we're doing about it. And I think a lot of people, I think there's a lot of subtlety with it because it's like a lot of people are like, oh, you should just have like free respecs all the time so that it's just easy, and if you make a mistake, it's no problem. This kind of thing, and I kind of look at.
I don't even know if that's it, to be honest. I've thought about that for a very long time, and I've discussed this many times. The proper tutorial thing and introduction goes a long way, but I don't think it's in the way of like, here's us introducing you to the different elements of the game and explaining them. Like, to me, a proper introduction for a game like Path of Exile is something that gives you the opportunity to experience all the things that make PoE great, while simultaneously doesn't overwhelm you, and you're having fun from the beginning. You don't feel punished for not knowing things. And the only way to really do that is if you're overwhelmingly focused on actual in-game aspects. So like, you're running into a boss, and that's something that Last Epoch does really well, despite being an incredibly complex game. And I think GGG is going to have to make some sacrifices here. It's just that Last Epoch is just, it's an easy game. If you're like a Path of Exile player and you go on to play it and you're going to play hardcore, you're pretty likely to get pretty high up there because the game is just inherently very complicated from a character point of view. But because you're able to cruise so much through the campaign, I feel like that's kind of like the only way to do it. The problem is that for a game like Last Epoch, you don't have to pack damn much by the time you get to the character to the actual end game, which in that case is monoliths. In PoE, there's a lot you have to pack. So even spreading that out is pretty difficult because you have to continue to allow the player to learn when they get to maps without overwhelming them initially. So at this point, I think they just have to find a happy medium between removing a lot of the content bloat from PoE1, which they've already said that they're going to be doing, and then possibly do the opposite of what they were doing for PoE1 currently, which is they made the game a lot harder. And in the early acts, especially, like if the Act 1 is the hardest act in the entire game, like, let's be real. Then you get to Act 2 and it's a little bit easier, and then Act 3 is like, oh, this game is suddenly a joke, even though it was so hard in Act 1. So you have a combination of things being like incredibly hard in Act 1 on top of you feeling like you're getting punished because now you don't understand these things about the game, and you have to because the game is so hard. So if you make the game sufficiently easy in the early stages, and if you allow the natural progression where the player can focus and eventually come to the conclusion, hey, maybe I should improve my character in some way or understand these things, I think they're going to have a lot more success than just going like, here's this thing and here's that thing and this works this way and you should look at that, and that's just gonna overwhelm everybody. Like, I don't think that's ever gonna work. But yeah, the downside is that the early stages of PoE are probably going to be significantly easier if that's something that they actually want to accomplish. But I wonder how Jonathan's going to continue to answer.
Look at that and I'm like, I don't know that that's really necessarily going to solve the problem. I think, like, we've kind of got this issue of, like, trying to communicate information in a succinct way so it doesn't kind of scare people off, but also enough information you actually sort of get everything. So I've been looking into ways recently about how we can kind of do that. I think that, like, I mean, this is like a feature that we've just been proposing recently, but kind of haven't actually gone any way towards implementing yet. But we're talking about like making it so that when you go to allocate stats on the passive tree, that it's more clear whether or not the skills that you have equipped would actually be affected by it. Like this kind of thing. Like we've been discussing sort of like, you know, what are the common pitfalls that people are going to run into. But the other thing as well is that we're planning on just doing some straight up...
I mean, what are the very basics though? Like, I don't even know. Isn't the very basic thing developing your character and understanding your build and knowing what ability you want to play? You're already from the get-go involving the skill tree, the gem system, the currency, items. These are like the four most complex aspects of PoE, and that's like the thing that you open up with, right? Like, I don't know. Even more basic than that? I mean, maybe like some form of a pre-made archetype for every character, and not just being able to do whatever the hell you want from the very get-go, right? Using crafting bench, showcasing resist properly. Okay, crafting bench is way too complex. Like vendoring items maybe, but even then you're having to introduce the recipes and like currency shards and what, like even just the fact that you can turn a wisdom scroll into a transmute, into an augment, into an alteration, like into a jeweler, into a fusing, you know, like even that alone, into a chance of like that alone is just too complex. Like already. And you're having to know that by the time you're in Act 3, and that alone just like blows up your mind, you know? We need Exile school. See, you guys are joking, but like these aren't realistic solutions, right? That's too advanced. Yeah, I mean, it's already too much. I just really think, again, this works for Last Epoch, right? So the way that I've seen people play Last Epoch and the way that I've played Last Epoch myself is because of the difficulty of the game, it allowed me to experiment and mess around as much as possible because I understood the immediate investment, the cost, how much it would take to respec. The game did a good job at explaining that to me. So even if I ever ran into a situation where I'm like, ooh, I feel like my character is a little bit underwhelming, I don't need to understand anything else about the game other than, what if I click this thing instead of that thing? Oh, my character is worse now? Let's go back with no cost. I feel like that is very important. The early game respecs, maybe the way that it was on China, where below level 70, you're able to just respec completely for free. Just globally, you can just reset your passive points. I don't know. I think things like that are gonna be necessary for if you want to appease newer players, because obviously you don't necessarily have to. Like PoE's been doing that and it's been fine, but I think with PoE2 they're trying to make it so that, you know, more people play the game, right? Yeah, again, I've thought about this long and hard, and the only way that I can see it is by, yeah, allowing players to focus on gameplay, and gameplay really like leading you by the hand. But from what I'm understanding, there's going to be mechanics, there's going to be bosses, there's going to be things that you're needing to learn to even progress. Otherwise the game is too difficult on top of having a character. I really don't know how they're going to accomplish this, unless the initial difficulty that we've seen of PoE2 and the amount of mechanics that early bosses get is just going to be severely toned down, or maybe we just had like, you know, they were still just figuring all this stuff out. I don't know. Because again, in Last Epoch, that's another thing that's very good. There are different bosses with a lot of different mechanics, and if you aren't paying attention, you will die, but otherwise, they're kind of easy, you know. They're not kind of easy. They are easy.
So you can
like the
always
campaign,
log out and reset the boss fight,
but for like
you
2 times,
right?
you know.
Like you're not going to. If you Alt F4, ultimately, that ends the boss fight, right? Because yeah, because you can log back in and start from scratch. But the key thing you can't do is just whittle the boss down like one, like log out, go back to town, heal, go back to the boss, and then continue from scratch. You know what I mean?
See, but even this, like, we're talking about making things easier, and GGG's like, by the way, you can't portal out. If you fail, it resets everything. You're not even having to like rerun. You're just dead. You're having to redo the entire thing. Like, these aren't features that are going to help, right? Because what do you start thinking? Like, what is the average? PoE takes no skill. And already what Jonathan has been addressing. Like, what is the average newbie? What is the average gamer is going to think? It's not a me problem. It's not a skill issue. I am good gamer. It has to be my build. It has to be my items. Oh, I'm just really unlucky with my items. Oh, that's the problem here. It's not that I'm getting hit by a giant hammer right on the dome for the 17th time in a row and proceeding to die. No. So they're gonna find issues in other elements that aren't obvious to them, because it should be obvious that if you're getting smacked in the head, you know, you're gonna die. But then that's something that they won't necessarily see or understand. But what they do know is that they don't understand how their build works. They don't understand how the passive tree works. They don't understand how the skill gems work, how the ascendancies work, how the combinations of that with the gear works on top of everything. And now they're like, oh yeah, bad game. Like, it further emphasizes the problems that already pre-exist in PoE1 if you want to make a game that appeals to other people. But honestly, Jonathan's answer of just like, yeah, we're gonna make it so that those guys are gonna have a lot of fun. Like, that answer was kind of like, yeah, it's still Path of Exile. I don't think they're gonna be doing anything. And you know what? If you can't take Path of Exile at its worst, you don't deserve it at its best.
So like, it is actually, I mean, maybe okay isn't the word, but you know, it is a thing you can do to Alt F4 from a boss fight to prevent your death. And I think that is something that there is really no solution for, if it even honestly needs solving. Like, but because now, but in PoE1 the cost wasn't high enough, right? Because like you just go back and continue the boss fight from where you left off. If you like, you still have to be able to kill the boss in one go, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
In PoE2, which was not the case before. So and this actually, by the way, is something that we have to be really careful about, because it means that bosses that are progression blocking can be actually progression blocking, right? Like, you know, like if you can't kill it, you just can't continue the game in some cases, right?
Yeah,
or something like that. So
yeah, Jonathan, you gotta at least for the campaign, bro. Like, for maps, I think that makes sense, because you're in the end game, even though entering maps is not really the end game. But you know, a lot of people would say this is the end game. But for the campaign, yeah, I mean, maybe. It depends on presentation, right? Like, games like Dark Souls have essentially the same model, and they are successful. And again, looking back to Lost Ark, it's kind of the only thing that's of substance that you do in the game is killing bosses. It's the same way that something like Dark Souls would be, where the game is the difficulty of getting over this next obstacle. So in that sense, if they market the game right, if they present it correctly, if it's not something where it's just like zoom, zoom, boom, boom, you actually have to pay attention, and you feel a sense of satisfaction if you figure out a boss and you triumph over it, and not just by gear, but by improving your play. That could be it, right? Because that's really what it is, for at least what it was for me in terms of games like Dark Souls. Whenever I would get to a boss, it wouldn't be like, oh, I need better this, I need better that. Sure, there would be situations like that where that would be immediately obvious, but most of the time, I would go to a boss, it would two-shot me with some stupid-ass attack, and I'd be like, I can dodge that, I can kill it. And I just bash my head into a wall for 12 hours straight until eventually the enemy boss fell down, and I went, nice. That was good. I did a good job. And if you can get that feeling into PoE, that's gonna be good enough. But you really just can't feel like you're getting cock blocked by items or something else that you just have no idea about and the game doesn't tell you, and you have to look it up on the wiki and read a guide and fucking go to Subtractant's channel to see the latest leak from the last Jonathan the Reddit post that got transcribed into like you really, come on, man. You don't need any of this.
You know, there's people have to get good in some cases, but also have to be really careful that those progression blocking bosses don't, you know, completely alienate people as well.
With that in mind, I'm actually
we hate those
something
people.
that came to mind is it going to be like a one campaign per character type of thing, or will you be able to like have multiple characters to kind of help with the bosses along to kind of alleviate the progression?
Oh. Sorry, I'm not quite sure what you mean about that. But I mean, you will have to complete the campaign on each character.
Okay.
But you can always like, I mean, just like in PoE1, right? Like there's things you can do to rush another character through, you know, like quickly.
I think he meant like you can essentially skip parts of the campaign, right? Like, oh, I can't do it on this character. Let me get on another one, and then that progresses for both characters. Which, to be honest, I mean, it's the idea of like doing the campaign once and then getting over it, but I don't know. I can still see that working for PoE. Even though I'm personally not a fan, I think that's been such a big point of contention for Path of Exile players forever, right? The whole idea that you're having to redo the campaign over and over, and that's a big problem for people. But I mean, again, like, it's Path of Exile. If you're going to be grinding out for hours, dude, doing the campaign in like 4 hours or even 6 or even 10, if you're one of those whiny ass losers that doesn't want to improve at all and just wants to get it done, even then you're taking like 10 hours at the most to do it if you've already done it once or twice before. So it really shouldn't be that substantial, but for some people it is, and it prevents them from continuing to play. But I don't even know if I believe that. I've never like somebody like Nico. Nico is a good example of that. He hates the campaign. He doesn't want to do the campaign. There's no way that he's going to do the campaign. But even if he does do the campaign, he's going to get to the end game and quit anyway. Because the same mindset that he has for the campaign immediately applies to the end game too. At the end of the day, it's a game made by Grinding Gear Games. You're going to be grinding, bro. Like, there's just no way around it. It's gonna be reused assets. It's gonna be reused the monsters, abilities, whatever. And you're just trying to put it all together and make it make sense. And that's the video game. I don't know. You're just solving a puzzle the whole way through. Made out of the same elements, but it's a different puzzle, you know? It makes into something else. That's just always what it's gonna be. So even for somebody like Nico, who's so like adamantly against the campaign, he's just never going to play the game, you know? There's just no way that he's going to be like, I got over this hurdle and now I'm going to play. But he's also like not really a PoE player, right? And there are a lot of people like MP or whatever, people in his group where maybe that's like a big issue for them. But if you're going to play a character for hundreds of hours and invest all these divines and figure stuff out and farm currency and everything, really? You can't take a couple hours of the campaign? I think one big thing that should happen, if we're on the topic of fuck them noobs, is probably just make all active abilities level 1. You know, don't necessarily introduce all of them. Don't give players access to all of them. Make sure that you're like limiting that. But making things level 1 and making things functional from the get-go and giving people the ability to use their main ability from level 1, even if it sometimes results in somebody not liking it, even though they would have liked it if they equipped it in the end game. I think that would go a long way as well, but I don't know. That's something that I would really like for myself. I don't know if that's necessarily the case for a lot of other people that have the problem with the campaign. Because I love the campaign. And I'm probably gonna love the PoE2 campaign too. But then, yeah, my big point of contention is the fact that gems can be so tricky and so annoying. And like, oh, I just need to equip this item at level 80. Stormfire, anyone? If you put it in another way, why should I take 4 hours to speedrun the campaign, even if I'm capable, when I could just have fun with those 4 hours elsewhere? Yeah. I mean, I absolutely understand that. If it's like something like that, where it's just strictly agonizing and it's only ever detrimental for you. For a very long time, I was heavily against some alternative form of leveling that is somewhat like maps, but honestly, at this point, I don't think that it's gonna really hurt the game. Like, would adding an endless delve to like level 70 really hurt the game that much, or some form of an endless ledge or whatever? I think that they should void everything. I wonder, that I think that would be an interesting experiment. What if they just void everything that you get on the campaign? You're still like making your character, and then you get to level 70 and your guy's just naked. I think people would accept that, and it would be a decent middle ground for what GGG wants to do. Even if it takes the same amount of time. I don't think people care about that. They just want like that character there. And it's kind of one of those things where everybody wins. I don't know. Campaign sucks and early balance is whack. Yeah, I mean, of course. But that's something that they're trying to address with PoE2. They tried to rework a little bit of the PoE1 campaign, but whew, that was a disaster. Part of the reason why, well, it's the biggest reason for why I'm saying that Act 1 is the most difficult one. IMO is just that leveling another character, if not done really fast, feels like a temporary time waste because nothing really worthwhile can happen for your overall progression of your account league. Yeah, I mean, again, it's all good arguments, and different people are going to have different feelings on this and how it affects them and how they would like to perceive it. At the end of the day, you know, we're all going to dance the way that GGG plays the song, but I do think that a little bit of leniency would probably go a long way in the early game experience, even if it's just giving, because it's not even, you know, we're talking about like real solutions, you know, we're discussing realistic possibilities. Just give them the illusion of it. Again, make it so that they feel like they have an option even when they don't. Like, give them ledge, but don't give them items. Don't give them like that long-term progression other than actually having the character. Make it take twice as much time, and people will be like, oh, I like this. I hate the campaign. I love this so much because I hate the campaign so much. Like, I don't know. I'm sure that GGG is like master manipulators, okay? They will be able to come up with something. It's only a matter of whether or not they actually want to do it. But with PoE2 on the horizon, and considering how much they're focusing on the campaign and how much they want the campaign to be this like new revitalized experience, it might be a fucking noob situation, you know?
Right. No, I was thinking like if you had a character that really wasn't good at all against a certain boss, could you get your other character to kill it for that
I
one?
see what you mean. No. So yeah, it doesn't work like that. It basically works like PoE1 in this regard.
Okay.
Yeah. Although interestingly, well, no, actually, scratch that. I was about to say something. I realized we haven't announced it yet.
Okay.
Wait a minute.
So I have maybe a difficult question for you, but around the time we got Ruthless, we started hearing some of the news for PoE2, and a lot of it kind of matched up. And we'll talk about the crafting bench and all that being removed, just kind of similar features in a way.
I thought about reviewing it, but I feel like there's so many of these things that GGG like realizes and doesn't realize that is or isn't going to make it into the game long term, that there's just no reason to analyze something that Jonathan said there, because it's probably not even going to make it. Like, I don't know if you guys know this, and probably a lot of people still don't know this, but the very first time that anybody outside of GGG heard anything about life nodes was actually me. I was talking to Jonathan, or to Neon and Hrishi, and Rory, and we were just like talking about itemization or something, and they were just like blah 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 blah. We're talking, and at some point one of them went, oh yeah, especially with the fact that there's no life notes in the skill tree anymore, the items are, and he just kept talking. I'm like, wait, whoa, what is the what? And then yeah, it turned out, and later on, I'm like, you guys should probably like announce this and talk about it. How are we on day 2 at ExileCon, and you guys haven't talked about the fact that there's no life nodes on the skill tree, and it's all item based? They just haven't said anything, and they're like, oh yeah, we made that change like a year ago, and we haven't talked about it. And then later on, I think they officially said it publicly on like Subtractem's thing, and it wasn't even anything that they were trying to like keep on the down low or anything like that. They just changed it like a year ago and totally forgot about it. So it's one of those things where, yeah, we could analyze it and explore it and figure out like, well, what does Jonathan mean? Does it mean that there are changes? But really, it might change a million times over, you know? So why you typed this? Whoa, why am I at the Raiz, huh?
Ruthless in PoE1 has seen kind of like lukewarm popularity. Personally, I really like it. I think it's maybe a touch more ruthless than I would like. But
Whoa.
I mean, like
Actually
I'm playing non-ruthless this league, and
Right.
so
Actually
far this
agree.
league I've found about 30,000 alteration orbs, to where I don't even bother using an augmentation orb because it takes too much time to click it back and forth, right?
Bro.
So obviously the answer is
Except I
somewhere
do.
in between the two.
I
But
agree.
how are you designing the kind of the pacing of the game and the abundance of currencies and items and all that? What has the goal changed?
Please
seeing
address
Ruthless
it.
not like explode in popularity, I guess is my question.
So there's a lot to talk about here, like a lot. I guess the first thing with Ruthless is I think Ruthless did definitely go too far. And more to the point, I actually think Ruthless bundled in too many things in one go.
Don't care.
I think if Ruthless had just been item drop changes and hadn't done a lot of other things that
I love Ruthless,
did,
but
like,
don't
for
care.
example, crafting niche removal and the movement skill stuff and like a bunch of other that stuff, I think it actually would have gone down a lot better. And I also think as well that there probably wasn't enough attention paid to map sustain and a few other details like that. Like in particular, I think one of the major philosophical things we did learn from Ruthless is that we need to make sure not to.
It's a PoE2 interview, and they still can't stop themselves from talking about Ruthless. I mean, it is relevant. It is relevant though, because yeah, undoubtedly. I mean, even I was talking about that where I'm just like, you're having to click like every map, one, move. You're having to click like 40 things. Even I'm like not even picking up items. I literally am not. I'm just picking up currencies that are over 1 chaos. And every time I exit a map, I'm picking up like so many things and having to move so many things that yeah, a legitimate comeback at that point against me is just play Ruthless, then you don't have to click so many things. It's like, yeah, but should that really be what the game is?
Reduce the access to content.
I hate it.
Being a big
I
thing.
hate
Like,
wisdom
I think
scrolls.
That Ruthless did make it too hard to get access to content.
I hate them all.
And also, like, probably the currency was a bit too rare. There's like various things about that that were just, I think, not quite right. But also, and I'd love to fix those in Ruthless, honestly, but the problem with that is that whenever we say, hey, we're doing a bunch of Ruthless stuff to improve it, we just kind of get a lot of, why are you working on Ruthless? You know what I mean? Like, so I don't think that, like, the ship has kind of sailed there, unfortunately, which is a bit of a shame, which isn't to say we won't ever address it.
Really?
But, I think we at least look.
Right, that is an interesting perspective, though. Because I don't think, like... I think, if anything, people undoubtedly had very low expectations of Ruthless, and just about everybody was positively surprised. I don't think there would have ever been a situation in which, like, oh yeah, let's tweak a little bit of currency and this and that, where the people who hated Ruthless are suddenly going to be like, yeah, I love this now. I don't think that could have ever happened. I think a lot of people were positively surprised, but it also, I mean, I don't, this obviously was like a passion thing for GGG. And maybe for people like Jonathan, and they're still like doing a lot of changes because a lot of people are actually just playing Ruthless. But I don't think it's one of those things where they should be abandoning it. I don't think the feedback is like, yeah, we don't want to hear about Ruthless. I think the feedback is like, we don't want to hear about Ruthless over the other things. If you guys are going to do a PoE announcement, PoE1 announcement, we want to hear about PoE1. And then maybe at some point, you know, you talk about Ruthless. But they've been kind of doing all these things in reverse. And so, I mean, even this, probably a lot of people are going to be like, Kripp mentioned Ruthless for 3 seconds. Why are they talking about Ruthless? I'm talking about Ruthless right now. And it's probably too much. So I would hate for GGG to get the impression that Ruthless was this like failed idea, because, you know, it's got potential. More potential than Diablo 4. And Diablo 4's got a lot of potential, guys. I don't know if you guys heard about it. That's a good...
Learned a lot from Ruthless to help there. So I mean, I guess that's one side of things. But the next side of things, I guess, just comes into all of the general philosophy of how item drops should be, should be done in PoE2. And I think everyone can agree that we definitely need to fix the fact that the amount of shit on the screen is so high that, I mean, like, okay, so random thing, Mark was decided that what he was going to do this league in PoE1 was play the like ultra ridiculous item finding strategies. You know, he's never actually done the like full on crazy strategies before. And one of the things he ran into was the fact that when you have you get to a certain point, you can't even press Alt anymore. Because the game client will take so long to have all of the pop-ups appear on screen that you get disconnected from the server. So that's not so good. There's definitely...
Dude, because this is like, what, 2 days ago? Oh, man. Does Jonathan know? Does he know? I don't know.
There's definitely some problems there. So yeah, that's obviously the other side of the extreme. But I guess I'm interested to actually hear your question about this, because this was an interesting one. Is what do you think should be the difference in amount of value that, say, an average, like let's say 50th percentile player gets versus a 99th percentile player? Like, I'm interested to hear what kind of multiplier you believe is good.
Ooh. That's a tough one. I mean, Kripp's probably going to be put on the spot, so he's going to answer quickly. Honestly, I don't feel like the difference should be that big. But, I mean, it depends, because there's such a big gap, right? Like, the difference between a 1% player and, like, a 99% player isn't, like... It isn't even 99 times the amount of efficiency. It's like actually more than that, you know? So it's like a ridiculous amount how big that difference is. So it's not even... To me, that should be like a maximum of like a 1 to 5 difference, but I can see how that would be unfun for a lot of people if we're not including, like, if we're talking like, hey, somebody is a solo player versus somebody who's like juicing, you know? If I'm thinking that, the difference for that to me should be, yeah, the person who's juicing, who's specifically doing this one thing, and they're not being like abusive, they're just using game mechanics, should be like 1 to 5, because it's like 5 times more. But I would imagine that currently in reality, we are talking about like hundreds, if not 1,000 times the difference.
It's really tough. I don't know. I quite like the ruthless economy. I quite like it because everything has significance, and everything has significance. I
like that too, yeah.
After playing ruthless quite a lot for like 2-3 weeks, I start to have an overabundance of transmutation orbs, right? So that's when they start losing their value. I feel that's honestly a good point to be at. You know, when a currency that's fairly regularly dropping becomes worthless, being like 2 weeks for a hardcore player in. Just everything kind of mattering is one of the really big appeals for Ruthless for me. I feel like the conversation of the average player versus, you know, the top 1% player kind of gets lost in Trade League because people are really good at manipulating the economy, or people are really good.
Okay, yeah, but we're talking about, just so we're clear, I'm talking about like actually playing the game, not like, you know, messing around with the economy or flipping or under, like, none of that.
Play in parties efficiently, where that model gets completely destroyed. So I really hesitate to give an answer in numbers there.
I think you still need to have a reasonably large disparity between like average, like 50th percentile and 99th percentile, because that's kind of the thing that you're striving for a lot of the time, is increasing your drop rate. And so I actually think that one of the issues is, then the other question is, alongside this, to kind of, let's establish some constants here, right? So
he's trapping me. Okay, now I feel like I said something stupid. He's trying to trap me. He got me to say stuff, and now he's gonna be like, oh yeah, what about this?
And this may seem like a high number, but I think that you need a difference of 1,000 times between the best player and the average player of amount of wealth acquisition. So that is the same number of items. I'm saying like value of the stuff that you're getting, and that's so that you've got something to strive for, right? Like you need that level of like of disparity from the bottom to the top, to kind of make it actually like.
I mean, that's what it is in my eyes. That's what it is. I said hundreds to thousands. I mean, that's a large disparity, but yeah, it's big. I mean, also, I was talking about like 1 and 99. I think he's talking about 90 and 50, right?
Like to actually give some form of feeling of like, I'm getting better at this game, I'm improving, what I'm doing. So I don't know if does that number seem high or low to you? Like, what do you reckon? How does that feel?
It's, if you're considering the trading prowess of market geniuses, then it doesn't seem high. If we're talking about efficient play with stacking the right mechanics and multipliers, that does seem very high.
Yeah,
so I just don't know what we're talking about exactly.
I'm with Kripp.
Sure. I think we're just talking about like let's just say let's say from a map that you're running when you're, as I said, you're an average player running a map versus the absolute max mega juiced crazy map. You know what I mean?
See.
Like in terms of the amount of wealth coming from it. And so as I said, that may seem high, but actually I think you do need those kinds of numbers to achieve that. And so then the next question is, okay, well, how many more items can you actually drop on the ground from one to the other to actually feel reasonable? And I think that number's kind of not really more than 2x. Like maybe it's a little bit more than that, but the thing is, like on the actual ground, you probably don't want to see more than double the number of items from one to the other.
Okay,
and yet you need to fit, and you need to actually.
In PoE, it's so. I mean, maybe with a map it's a little bit different, but then like everything drops, because this league is a good example where things just rain, and there's just so much of everything, and it's getting to a point where picking up items that are worth a divine or even half a divine is kind of like, I don't know. Should I? It's kind of a lot of effort for nothing, But then, yeah, in terms of actual items that you're picking up, yeah, you're just picking up 200 more items, or whatever. Like, you just leave all that stuff on the ground, I guess. Because it's not even a matter of filtering it out. You just have to leave it because you just don't have enough inventory
You're receiving 1,000 times the value. So if we kind of break that down, I mean, like, so there's a few things that go into this. So one question is, and this sort of matters, is that efficiency of your build comes into it. Like, how fast can you do a map? Because that does come into the kind of like 1,000 number. So,
sure.
Like, if for example, the difference between an average
I would say
player
I'm including
and a
that.
1% player is like 10x in like speed of playing a map. So like, so if a bad player can do a map in 20 minutes and it takes a good player 2 minutes, for example, to do.
That's fair.
Then you've already kind of divided that by 10, which means that the actual items on the ground have to be 100 times more valuable per map. And I think that probably sounds like something that seems within the realm of reasonableness, I would hope.
I see.
Yep.
Okay.
But then the next thing as well is that if the amount of items on the actual ground
happening.
per monster you kill is only 2x higher, then that means you've got like you have to be able to have increase of rarity be worth 50 times, right? So basically you have to be able to increase the value of items on the ground by 50 times with just like rarity bonuses alone, and it needs to feel 50 times more as well.
Yeah.
It's not enough to just be like, in theory, I kind of know that this is more valuable. It has to really feel like you're getting 50 times more wealth.
Well, I actually had a question later on about.
Okay, but that makes sense because you can separate it, right? So you would have something that would build up towards some kind of like currency entropy system, for instance, where like instead of dropping 100 individual alchemy, you're dropping like an equivalent of that, which would be like, I don't know, 10 chaos, and it would build up into these big currencies, and you would feel like it's not even like RNG driven. It would feel like RNG, of course, but it could even be a form of an entropy system that would just build up, and eventually it'd be like, yeah, I'm waiting for this drop and it's not happening, but really you're like miscounting, you're trying to figure stuff out. And you could do the same thing for tiers of items, that like makes sense to me. And if anything, it would be it would have like a compounding effect, because now you're not dropping, you know, 100, I don't know, gold rims, let's say. Even though gold rims kind of a useful item, you're not dropping 100 gold rims, you're dropping like 1 squire. And now you're not having to look at 100 gold rims. I don't know. And it still feels like it's RNG, and there's still RNG in the different values, and you're gonna have to put a lot of effort into actually tiering these appropriately, because there's a lot of tier 1 items that are crap, and there's a lot of tier 17 items that are actually amazing, you know? So it would take a lot of effort, but I feel like that's the only way to really solve this problem that Jonathan's having, no? And honestly, GG has been talking about this for a very, very long time. And I remember even Bay Class like 3 years ago, or even maybe 4 years ago, where Chris would talk about this whole system that they have for squashing everything together and making smart loot and all this, like making sure that you're just not seeing as many items and you're not having to filter all of them and blah, blah, blah. And then they did something. They did make it so that currency drops stacked, and that's kind of it, you know? So you could further develop that, but it's just, I feel like it was a good idea they had that they never really had time to fulfill, or maybe they even failed along the way. Maybe it isn't reasonable. Somewhere they hit like a dead end and they just realized that, hey, this is not going to work long term. It's something that we can do right now, and it's going to work right now, but in the future we're going to have to adjust it. It's not going to be worth the effort. Same way as they approached skill balance, you know? GGG used to rebalance skills and change the meta and swap things and nerf stuff and nerf all the time and buff things up, you know, introduce new things for old builds to become cool, but then nerf those old builds. So now you feel like you're playing the same ability, but you're playing like a new version of it, you know, and it's equally as strong, or a lot of times, let's be real, it's stronger than it was before. So then if you were to apply the same kind of idea, and they couldn't balance skills, now you're having to balance drops. You know, you've run into a little bit of a pickle. And then, yeah, another compounding effect is obviously clear speed. Like the more power creep that is, the more ridiculous this is gonna get out of hand. And eventually, with enough power creep, we'll just reach the same point that we're at now, where everything just drops way too many. Everything just drops way too much stuff.
Magic Find in PoE2. Now, if I had to ask this question a month ago, you know, I would basically say, yeah, the rarity quantity system works out pretty well. But I don't know if you've played much this league, but the lists that you can generate, and you can generate a lot of them, have their own effective quantity and rarity multipliers. And it's maybe one of the first times we've seen such large rarity multipliers with such large quantity multipliers, and it does actually seem a little problematic with the amount of loot. I agree. So what?
You know what the crazy part about this is? That's not even a true statement. There were leagues where this was substantially crazier. Like Delirium leagues and leagues after that, and even to a certain extent things like Sentinel. The big difference was that it wasn't readily available. Now it takes very little effort for just about anybody to get to this like ridiculous point of Magic Find and whatever. But there were many parts of the game previously where you had access to even more, but like it actually required a real investment. You actually had to sacrifice your character's survivability. I mean, there were multiple leagues where everybody was running MF, you know? So I don't even think so. Maybe that's not true for like individual play. Maybe there never really was something like that worked as well for individual play. But I don't even know if that's... Man, people would run like fucking quantity. There used to be quantity gems, and even opening boxes was like insane. There were all these times where, yeah, compared to now, it was less because the game was different. But compared to like what the average player's experience to like what MF would get you was pretty insane. It's just that now you put a couple chaos into a character, you run tier 7 maps, and it's a whole new world, you know? It's very different than how it was done before. I think the global quantity multipliers were never this massive. I mean, do we actually have numbers? Because we know that they've decreased quantity from past mechanics by
multiple times, like multiple thousands of times over. So I don't know how much more they're getting, but as a baseline, there were a couple patches where they had to go into the thousands. I mean, what was the Legion nerf or the Delirium nerf that they did when the whole like 90% less loot thing happened? I mean, yeah, you were getting more baseline things, but if you were somebody that was juicing, it was multiple thousands of percent. I think, I mean, also a large part of this is also the Abyss thing that people weren't really abusing enough previously, I would say. That was the Alva nerf? Yeah, maybe it was the Alva thing. I mean, yeah, everybody would MF through Alva. That was another whole thing. So I don't even know if this is really, that it's never been to this degree. I think that it has been like this, but before, yeah, you had to put an effort, you had to run high maps, you had to do all these things that now it just doesn't matter, you know? If fucking Quinn can do it, dude, and he's having like the time of his life, then you know something's not right. Something's not right.
What kind of systems
It's not
may
right.
we expect with Magic Find and PoE2?
Yeah, so what I think that we need to do is that the way that rarity
Remove it,
works
remove
in
MF.
PoE1, one of the issues
Doesn't
is
work.
it saturates quickly, and also currency is not part of it, and also there's no kind of understanding of there's various other factors of value. So I don't want to go too much into the exact details of this, but effectively what we have to make sure of is that we have the ability to scale value of things on the ground with a single number, and for that to work for all types of items that monsters can drop in a good way, so that you actually feel like you're getting more. We don't just sort of saturate into uniques. I don't know if you know what I mean by that, but effectively you can get rarity to the point where no white items drop and only blue items drop, and then you can go from there to the only rares drop, and then you can go from there so that only uniques drop. Like that's
Diablo 2.
possible with the way that PoE1's rarity system works. But we need to sort of change this so that it works better, so that you can actually get higher values of rarity without.
Thanks, Rad.
Raiz just resubscribed for 27 months. PLS remove MF Boba.
I mean, now it sounds like he's just talking about like how I would envision this. Because, I mean, in my eyes, realistically speaking, remove MF. Straight up. I've just never seen it work. I've only ever seen it as an issue in PoE. The whole concept just doesn't make sense, you know? Run low-level stuff. The easier it gets, the better it is. I wasn't even like that aware of MF in PoE all the way until Delve. Delve really changed my perspective on MF so much, because that's already when MF was very prominent. But most importantly, I had such a massive issue with acquiring the best things in the entire game by running low-level characters and low-level content, and yeah, that just really sucked. And that's exactly what it is now. And that's really only when I began to think like, huh, okay, I've been playing D2 all my life. MF is a problem. I've been playing PoE all my life. This is a big problem if MF is actually the way that you're going to be doing this. I mean, even in games like D3, it was already an issue too, and you had to scale it in tangent with difficulty modifiers for it to even have any place ever at all. But then if you're trying to ramp up the amount of MF that you're getting and the amount of difficulty simultaneously, which is where the system should excel, you end up with Diablo 3 as your video game. That's not good either. Or Last Epoch as an end game that doesn't work in my eyes currently. So it's like, I don't know. The solution is just get rid of it, dude. Let people play their video games. Shit. I mean, it should be available, but it's always going to be a problem. Sooner or later, it's going to be an issue.
Kind of making it so that you kind of get the saturation. And the reason why kind of more quantity is necessary in PoE1
Gucci.
is because more rarity. If we changed all sources of quantity to be rarity in PoE1, everything would just be unique, and you wouldn't get any more currency, and it kind of wouldn't be like, that's not value in the right way, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So effectively, we need to improve the way the item drops work in order to make it so that, yeah, as I said, the goal would be you get like a ridiculous amount of juice. You see twice as many items on the ground, but you feel like you're getting, but each item is on average 50 times more valuable than if you didn't do that. And then since you're
Yeah,
10 times faster at
that's what
playing
I
the
talked
game than
about.
other people, the end result of that is 1,000 times more wealth acquisition, if you know what I mean.
Okay, yeah, I mean,
So that's
yeah.
kind of my view on sort of how this should work. And we basically just have to get to the point where that can be the case. Yeah, we have a lot of changes in mind already. I don't necessarily want to talk about the exact specifics of all of them, but that's my thinking, at least around how it should be on a high level, if you know what I mean.
I saw a number of people asking in chat when you were talking. I think a lot of people are wondering if the find more stuff part of the game is going to be a stat on your gear. I think that's something people are quite curious about.
Whether or not there's magic find. Yeah, I mean, we definitely want to have magic find still in the game as a thing you can
Definitely?
Okay. And you're
Yeah.
basically sacrificing character power for it, like you do in PoE 1.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
That should work basically the same way.
Okay.
I wish that he would ask why. Like, why is this? Other than having like an alternative playstyle, I don't know. GGG is so into removing ways that people play the game, especially with releasing PoE2 and removing all these mechanics and getting rid of old shit and everything, that I just don't understand how this is a big sacrifice, because D2 had it. Yeah, but like D2 is exactly the problem, you know? It's like I could be running maps on my, even in D2, and D2 is especially extreme, really, because in D2 it also shapes the type of content that you're doing. Like if I'm playing, even in mods like PD2, if I'm playing, you know, a bone necro, I'm gonna be running CS with 600 MF every time over running like maps, and maps are really good in PD2, but like eventually you're running both, and now you are absolutely getting the 1000% thing too. So, but like at least in that game, because you've got base layers of quantity and rarity that you get by entering maps, you end up in a situation where by doing the higher level content, which inherently has MF, you make the MF on the gear less valuable. But PoE doesn't have like stages of progression like that, because in PD2 it's like you run Diablo 2 content, then you run Lord of Destruction content, and then you run maps, and then you run high level maps, and each one of these has like a distinct thing that you're doing with your character, with your items. In PoE it's do campaign and now you're mapping. So I don't know. I mean, I would love for Jonathan to answer why it's important to nerf your character, because if there's no consequences to nerfing your character, because running low level content is equally as valuable as running high level content for the purpose of MF, then there's no downside. That's really the big problem, right? So even if they have this idea of like MF being something that you're sacrificing for the sake of something else, you just don't have that in current PoE. You just don't. So they're gonna have to tackle that in one way or another, or they're gonna run into the same issue as now, you know? I mean, realistically, in softcore, people are MFing to 16s anyway, so it doesn't even matter. Yeah, I mean, that's like a whole nother issue. That's just like, I think even in GGG's eyes, that's the game being like way overtuned if you're making those sacrifices. And Jonathan was giving the example of like somebody running a map in 20 minutes versus somebody running a map in 2 minutes. Like realistically speaking, if you're running maps in 2 minutes and now you're having to like sacrifice 10 seconds for like all this MF that you're getting, that's not appropriate. And the more you're going to be juicing up your character, the less of a difference there's going to be, because at a certain point, builds are so strong that you get to like a human mechanical cap rather than an in-game power threshold, you know? So it's like, 2-minute map, does this really exist now? I mean, I'm on hardcore, I'm running 2-minute maps all day, dude. And that's with league mechanics too. I don't know.
I was going to ask about the crafting bench being removed, but you mentioned recently to a Reddit reply that it's no longer going to be removed. And I kind of maybe wanted to ask more of a broad question. One part of
Wait, what?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
That should work basically the same way.
Okay. So I was going to ask about the crafting bench being removed, but you mentioned recently to a Reddit reply that it's no longer going to be removed.
Oh, really?
And I kind of maybe wanted to ask more of a broad question. One part about Path of Exile 1 I really like is...
Damn, I like the bench going away. I hated it. If I'm being real, the worst part about Ruthless and about events like Endless Delve was no crafting bench. And I played PoE before crafting benches were a thing, before masters were even a thing. And holy moly, dude. Having to like mess around with your gear and make dumb sacrifices because you're just unable to fit the pieces together just right for that exact moment felt really bad on hardcore. I know that for softcore, a lot of people are like, oh, I have 20% res. It's not a big issue. What if I die? Like, lol, I'll just respawn. But for hardcore, it always felt freaking terrible, dude. Terrible.
Knowing that I can kind of guarantee some kind of big parts.
Not to mention that like the crafting bench now is such a complex and intriguing thing. And pretty much always, and I'm experiencing this every day with either not remembering or not knowing certain things, that even when crafting, I would find myself being in a situation where I'm like, oh, I don't have a solution, but really there is a solution or a better way of doing what I'm doing if I just understand how crafting works. It was the same thing for Harvest. I think the best example of that was when everybody was like, these non-as whatever are useless. And then I think Carver, whoever, released like a 30-minute video explaining how they're actually better than the normal crafts. It's just that they worked based off of blocking, which then just makes them better. But it was so complicated for most people that they just didn't even see even a single like use for it, when in reality, it was the better way of crafting. And when it went away, you know, it kind of, I mean, they changed a million things, but that was like one of the major ones where they really messed with the crafting. And just that fact that somebody had a bad PoE experience based off of something that they thought was RNG in the hands of somebody else would have yielded like a completely different result. I think the bench accomplishes that, and it's just a get good noobs sort of situation. I mean, you can only be mad at yourself at the end of the day when that happens, right? Turning weapon into amulet was laughed at for 2 years. That taught us the plebs we are, how OP it was. Yeah, there's been plenty of examples of that where people would figure out mechanics, you know, really like weeks, sometimes months, sometimes years later that already pre-existed in the game. I mean, even the Abyss thing that it's so OP now. Oh, Abyss OP. That's been the case for years, guys. It's been the exact same way for years, you know? So, and yeah, the bench was a very large part of it. And I personally, I would hate for it to go away. It being replaced by something else that serves a similar function, but is even more like it, I would openly accept that. But the bench going away would have
to making a character when like a new league starts, and in one end it can be something like knowing that I can have access to a trigger craft on like a wand for a character like that. And in other cases, it can be like, while I might not be able to find a tier 0 unique, but for example, divination cards kind of offer this fragmented consistency of slowly knowing that you'll eventually get this one item. So is there going to be an element of that in PoE2? And maybe you can, I know some of the details are still getting worked out, but maybe some of your goals for the crafting bench, if you have set your mind.
Yeah, so the crafting bench absolutely needs to exist for exactly this reason. You should be able to at least get some certainty, if you know what you're doing, of being able to fix issues with your build. You know, even if you don't find
exactly,
you don't get lucky, you still are able to do something about that. So I think that's really important. So I think the crafting bench is good for that, and we do.
I would really love to hear as to why they wanted to remove it in the first place, because I didn't really even hear about that. I just knew that it's going away, and that's it.
Have a plan for what we're going to be doing to sort of make that work. As for divination cards,
I don't have any
it's sort of
information.
interesting because divination cards, like, I really like them in theory. I really do. And in SSF, I think they work really well. But the problem with target farming is
Picking up
that
items, I
you
guess, yeah.
effectively, when you have an economy, effectively what you're always going to target farm is whatever has the most value
You should.
in the economy, even if that's not the thing you actually want for yourself. You're just going to be like, okay, here's the thing that's going to have the most trade value, like per hour played on average. So therefore, I just play that. So I think that the way that that works in PoE1 with div cards is not so great. It sort of means that the people who, at least the people who want to get the most economic value, just end up farming one map forever and ever and ever.
Crimson Prison Gang is what they're
That's the
called,
one,
apparently.
Yeah. So that's a problem. So I don't have an immediate solution to that. There's been various solutions proposed. Basically changing the way that div cards work. I think, as I said, and I think in SSF,
Change the way that it works. Straight up. I mean, you're never gonna avoid the Crimson Prison situation. That's just always going to be the case. Like, that's not something that you're able to avoid. That's just something that you can rotate based off of different leagues and the Atlas and whatever. Which is why you need like a well-functioning Atlas. But you're just never gonna be able to get rid of it. Because this is exactly the issue that I've been yapping about forever when it comes to it. I even remember I had like a very passive-aggressive comment towards Octavian in regards to divination cards a really long time ago about how it's only ever like a crumb of some bullshit instead of being like a true target farm type of thing. Which, if done well, it can work. Like, that's one of the good elements of Last Epoch's endgame, for instance. In all the bad ways that it doesn't really work in my eyes. This is the one thing where it does make sense and it is a very clear progression, but it's not applicable to just currency. It's applicable to items and everything, which is a little bit too much. But we're talking about cards specifically. Like, yeah, they're gonna have to change it, and they're gonna need solutions too, I think, because it's just unavoidable. I don't know how you can ever make it so that the people that want to do the most efficient thing won't be stuck into doing like a Crimson Temple, you know? Cards are fine. Am I missing something? Cards suck. They serve no purpose. They should kill themselves now. Cards suck. It's only ever a crumb of some bullshit. Essentially, you should treat it as like another piece of currency on Trade League, and on SSF, they don't serve any function either. Because you're never going to get the whole thing of the thing that you actually need that is going to make it so that you're getting, that item that you need, right? That you're wanting to play around. You're not going to get that. And on Trade League, it's like, oh, yeah, it's just Chaos Orbs. It might as well just drop that, you know? So it's really... like, you could treat it as shards of items, I suppose, in some way, which kind of mitigates the issue with, like, I want a lightning coil, I'm never gonna find it, but if I buy cards, then I can get it, or whatever. But it's just never realistic for that to happen. You are with Harvest Gamba, yeah, but you lose more often than you win, you know? Is Gravies your boy? I mean, I've had some good Gravies too early on, so I don't know. Without divination cards, you farm forever without getting shit. That's not fun. In what game? I don't think so at all. Because, like, obviously the existence of divination cards just makes it so that other things don't exist as frequently. Like, you drop less divines because divine divination cards exist. Bottom line. Like, that's just always how it's going to work. Like, these things are balanced around each other. So in a world where divination cards were never introduced into the game, it would just be balanced out by something else because GG wants a pace. And how they accomplish it, a lot of times doesn't make a difference for them, you know? Literally no difference between dropping Apothecary and 40 divines on the ground in Trade League. Yeah, that's exactly it. There's absolutely zero difference. To me, what divination cards should have always been and would have always made sense as is something that you could target farm towards. It's like, yeah, this isn't the most efficient thing to do. This isn't something that other people are going to find useful. But I want this fucking thing, and I'm gonna run, I don't know, a Crimson Temple until I get enough cards to get a Soul Taker, and it's actually realistic, you know? To me, that would only ever make a lot more sense, and it would work in SSF because, again, you cannot avoid the issue of like one card being more expensive than the other one. Maybe the solution is not having cards for currency and only ever having cards for items, and then that way the amount of people that would be farming for like headhunter cards, for instance, right, the way that it was with Burial Chamber or whatever, would balance out economically with the amount of people who are like looking to purchase that but not farm the cards themselves. But that's like I don't know, at least for Headhunter that was never really the case. Most people just farmed for Headhunter. I don't know, do people really hate the game? Everybody's always like, oh yeah, bring that shit back, you know? Maybe. People like Ziz with Steel do farm out most expensive uniques with cards. Yeah, but they're doing it because they're just having fun on Trade League together, you know? That's not really something that is realistic for other people. I mean, of course, you can do it, but it's over the course of like a completely unreasonable amount of time, you know? People do it in SSF though. I mean, I've done it many times, but there's a big difference. It's like there's a limit to it, you know? If I run a Rise of the Phoenix on SSF, like I'm better off farming a Taste of Hate, you know, because Sun cards are fucked. So it's like you'd have to be rebalancing that over and over, and I think it just makes more sense if you just flip around the Atlas. Using Manny as an example is like saying Ubers are easy because Ben kills them day one, literally. Like that's it. It's crazy to me how people don't recognize that. It's like the same thing as people were saying like, I'm getting 90% less loot. And then Chris is like, actually, here's statistics for how much loot you're getting less. You're only getting this amount if you're average player. If you're above average, you're getting like he literally posted a spreadsheet of like how much less the average player is getting affected. And people went, no. And Chris got downvoted to shit. And it's like, I mean, you guys can think that the game works differently than what it actually does, but realistically speaking, yeah, using MP or Manny or Ziz or Steel as an example for how the game actually functions for like the rest of the player base, it's not fucking realistic, okay? It ain't realistic for you guys anyway. Shit, it's very not realistic for me either. Let's go.
It's cool. I like it. But
wait, what does he like? We've been yapping too long.
The people who, at least the people who want to get the most economic value, just end up farming one map forever and ever and ever.
Crimson
Okay, yeah.
Prison Gang is what they're called.
One,
apparently.
Yeah. So that's a problem. So I don't have an immediate solution to that. There's been various solutions proposed. Basically changing the way the div cards work. I think, as I said, and I think in SSF, it's cool. I like it. We need to do something different, I think, here. There'll be some discussion about that. But I do think div cards are cool. I'd like to see them come back in PoE2. We'll find a way, I suspect, to make that happen. But I don't know if they're necessarily going to work exactly the same mechanically as they do now.
Okay. I've been scouring the internet for all the PoE2 news, and that's included all your recent PoE2 interviews. And there was an interview you did at PAX West where you were asked what league mechanics are going to be ported over, at least roughly, from PoE1 into PoE2. And your answer was it kind of almost depends on which league mechanics you like. And it killed me that there was no follow-up question. So what PoE1 league mechanics do you like?
Okay, well, I am a big fan of Delve.
Okay. See, I think there's going to be things that essentially offer alternative playstyles to what like mapping is. So I think he would say things like Delve. You would say things like Heist. I can totally see those things. I don't think Harvest is on the league, right? Usually kind of hates Harvest, but now that they've recognized the usefulness of the bench, maybe? I really wonder about Harvest. Delve, Hi, Sanctum Tota. Yeah, Sanctum Tota for sure. I mean, I don't know about Tota because it wasn't. I personally really liked it, but you know, Alpha. Yeah, Alpha is a good mixture, right? Of like in game and out of game. The problem is like as power creep continues to progress, it kind of makes it so that you can put like hard caps on those mechanics, but the whole game is skyrocketing. So for a very long time now, Path of Exile's gotten to a point where it's like there's a lot of mechanics that don't involve maps enough, where you just don't want to do them. Like, hey, why would you do like Blight? Yeah, that was mine for sure. Why would you do Blight when it takes you, like, it extends the amount of time that you're spending in a map for so much more? Why would you do, well, Delve, yeah, when you could just be running maps and get more currency and blah, blah, blah. So I really wonder what else is he gonna say. The harvest is the most interesting part.
And Incursion.
Okay, Incursion, sure. Yeah, Incursion is a good mixture of like in-map and out-of-map things, for sure.
Definitely, those are two of my favorites. Partly because I just enjoyed development of them. Like, they were just really cool and thematic. I really enjoyed them. But I mean, there's lots of other mechanics that are just usually, you know, that are very popular with players. Things like Ultimatum and things like that. You know, like these are.
Are you guys having a blast with Ultimatum? I like Ultimatum, to be honest. I wish that the rewards were good enough. But Ultimatum, for a lot of people, I would imagine is like Blight. You either love that shit or hate it. I love Ultimatum. I feel like Ultimatum gave so many people the wrong impression this league, you know? Because when Ultimatum happened, the rewards were there, and Ultimatum is absolutely a mechanic. Because like there's a lot of mechanics in the game that I actually don't care about the rewards of. I just don't care. If I like something, like I like Blight, I'm gonna fucking do Blight, you know? Am I gonna run it forever like I did this league? No, I'm probably gonna respec it at some point. But I like Blight, I like doing Blight, I like doing Harvest. I'm just fucking gonna do it. But then, whether I get the rewards from it or I don't get the rewards, the satisfaction of the gameplay isn't tied to it. But when it comes to Ultimatum, yeah, I think you need really good rewards for Ultimatum to be satisfying. You need to feel like you're getting something if you're continuing to build and build and build and build. Because getting to, you know, round 12 and getting like 4 Vol Orbs is just, you know, it's the meme. I can't. That I gave Ultimatum so many chances and it just never felt right, man. It just never felt right. It never did.
These are great. I mean, I love Ultimatum too, but you know, like there are certain crowd favorites for sure. You know,
Don't say
Incursion.
Breach. He said
sorry,
Incursion.
I did that one. Let me think about other ones. What are my favorites in there?
They don't have to be in PoE2. This is a non-commit, no
no,
commitment
fair
answer
enough.
here.
I'm just trying to think of like what are my other favorite ones. I mean, Breach of.
Fuck! I knew you. No. If you say Breach, that shows that last time you played the game was 2017. There it is. I told you he's gonna say Breach. I mean, Breach is like something I feel like they have to say. It's not even like a matter of it being good or bad. Although I do think that Breach is really good, but like it was such a like game-changing thing. I feel like Breach, the league and the league mechanic just made everything so different. It really changed everything. Oh shit, let's go, dude. It made everything so different. The whole game changed. The perspective changed. Everybody realized like, holy shit, this game is way different than we thought what you could do in it. It's like, I thought this was an ARPG, run around, kill monster, but now you're running around, kill monster, kill boss, go into this, build up that. You know, splinters got introduced. Everybody loves splinters. Except back then they were actually meaningful, so that's like a whole nother thing as well.
Obviously, you know, Breach was one of the earliest leagues that I really felt there was just something really Like, I feel like
Breach was special.
What was before Breach? There wasn't really that many good ones before
Legion,
right?
I think, was before Breach.
No, what? Criparian. Even Jonathan's like, neighbor, what? What are you saying right now? No, I don't think so.
Legion before Breach?
Yes.
Surely not.
Yes, the confidence. I love Kripp. This is the crazy part. This is even the craziest part about this. PoE leagues. We were just looking at this the other day. So to me, Breach felt like it was pretty deep into PoE. I remember when Breach trailer happened, it was like crazy as fuck. I remember like cloaks being a recent thing in PoE. Before that, it was all wings and whatnot. And now you look at PoE leagues, and again, keep in mind that it used to release one softcore and one hardcore league together. So essentially, the initial leagues here are like on the same date, right? And look where Breach is. Bro. It's super early. What were the leagues before it? Essence, Perandus, Tempest, Bloodlines. Okay, so I'll translate this for everybody who's new. Essences, you guys know what that is. Okay, but there was no Atlas. Perandus was just like a fat man giving you unique items. Tempest was like these little circles on the ground going boo. Then you have Bloodlines, which is literally just the modifiers you get on blue mobs. Okay. So like all the annoying stuff that you get on blue mobs, like corrupting blood, that was Bloodlines, the league. Beyond, everybody know. Well, I guess Beyond was way different back then. And Invasion, which was actually a sick ass fucking league. Invasion was crazy. And then Nemesis, you know, these were the Nemesis mods, the things that eventually turned into Arch Nemesis. And Onslaught, which was mobs just have 30% attack, cast, and movement speed. You know? So like really there was nothing before Breach. Breach really feels like it's somewhat recent to me. And the fact that Harby was like immediately after, and yet it's 2016. But this was a league that really changed PoE insanely. Like it just, the game just spiraled like crazy. Tempest was the last time there was 2 leagues at once, so don't skip Prophecy and Talisman. Oh sure, Prophecy was, I mean Talisman was not a league. Let's just agree on that. And then, yeah, Prophecy was a pretty big deal. I'd say Prophecy definitely made the game feel different, but not to the extent that Breach did. Again, the whole idea of like crafting bosses, somewhat deterministic sense of progression, different like tiers of difficulty, cloaks. I repeat, cloaks. They added cloaks into the game. Like I still remember to this day. Hey, where is it? The music. And then the guy charging. Oh, the cloak animation! They did a whole thing for a cloak animation, dude. This was the first time you ever saw cloaks in PoE. This. Oh. Oh my god. And then it goes hard as fuck with the shield charge. Ah! That shit broke everybody, dude. That shit was crazy. The shield charge with the projectiles and the cloak going in the wind. Brother. It was a real game changer, you know? It really was. The Edge, yeah, I have no idea how that guy lived for that long. You would just instant die. But do you remember these details? What do you mean? That was like the whole thing. That was the shtick, man. It was crazy.
Am I wrong about that? Jeez.
You're so right, Jonathan.
Maybe I'm just wrong about that.
Oh,
But hey,
apparently I'm wrong about that. Okay.
Kripp is cooked.
right.
Legion was after. Okay.
If I had to guess, Breach was like, bro, like 3 or 4 years before Legion. No, 3 years. Yeah. Oh, to be like 2.5. 2.5. Wait. Yeah. Sorry, I clicked the wrong thing.
Yeah. Anyway, Breach, I'm a big fan of. There's a few things like Delirium is pretty cool. There's definitely some cool things like that.
Delirium.
Generally speaking, though, a lot of the leagues that are my favorite ones are the ones
up.
which involve, and I know this is kind of can be a bit in the community. People have different opinions about this, but I do particularly like the ones that involve there being some kind of map that has interesting mechanics on it, and you go out and you do stuff on it, which is why I particularly like things like Delve. But I know in the community, a lot of people prefer leagues that are inside, an area. So we tend to try to have a mix. But like when it comes to designing leagues, my favorite way to do it is kind of look at other games and be like, okay, what are some interesting other games from completely different genres, and be like, how can we do some of the interesting gameplay from one of these and make it into a PoE league? So that's kind of tends to be what I.
Chris probably doesn't even like heist, and he would say heist, dude, just to piss people off.
I most enjoy. And so I was kind of one of the people who really enjoyed things like Harvest, even though it was way too complicated. And
Let's go!
I don't like the way Harvest is now, but the old way Harvest was, like things like that were really cool. But
he gets it.
There were issues for sure.
Well, other than the gameplay side of things, one thing that I think is really important personally for a league mechanic is that it offers something you can't get anywhere else. Like if you want to double corrupt an item, then you do template. Just have to. You can't get.
For sure.
Yeah. So is that going to be at least a thought process behind league design in PoE2?
100%. It's very important that that is what the end game makes the end game feel like there's a lot of variety, because you've got different goals.
See, I wonder what he means by that, because I don't need to have incursion in the game to do double corrupts, There's like 30 other league mechanics that can accomplish the exact same thing. So, I mean, shit, put it on a crafting bench. Put it on Betrayal, Put everything on Betrayal. So I don't know if that should necessarily, determine it. I like Alva. I mean, I like Incursion. I like the idea. A little dated, but they've done a good job keeping it up, Remove Betrayal. Well, the problem is, you have to think it's PoE2, right? So the idea here is that the game is good on launch, but it needs to remain good long term. So naturally, you're going to do a certain amount of over deleting and over replacing. Like, for instance, if they were to get rid of something like double corrupt, it wouldn't necessarily be for the reason that they don't want to double corrupt things anymore. It's that they can accomplish that same way of developing your character through a better means with that idea in mind, yeah? So you're still getting the same amount of power, but now it feels better to get it, and it continues to do that. Because there's just always going to be things that are going to be a problem long term, and a lot of the times those things are power creepy. I think double corrupting is kind of because it comes with such a large downside and it's such an end game thing, that I think that's not necessarily a good example of it. But either way, you're gonna have to over remove things, because you need to give the game room to breathe. You need to give it design space. You need to be able to continue to develop it and introduce things and have the game be something that is good. So naturally through that, a lot of things that are good right now in PoE1 and could have been good on the launch of PoE2 are not going to make it in, just so they can continue to improve it, right? And you got to be especially, I think, aware of that, because with PoE2, I would say PoE1's biggest problem right now, as an existing or a new player, is content bloat. I mean, it really just is. It really is. And as much as I wouldn't say double corrupting is content bloat, yeah, something like Incursion, it really could be, If that's the entire thing that the entire mechanic is revolving around, then it's not contributing in any other way. Put it on a boss, Make it so that you fight the Carvarosco, the cartographer, or some shit, and he has his workbench behind him, and anytime you enter his lab, you can use one of his items, and one of those items is a double corrupting. The other one is corrupting gems. There's another one that I don't know, what are like other league mechanic things that adds delirium or whatever, and then you're not having to actually have delirium mobs. Like, I don't know, just as examples, right? You gotta pack a lot of the old shit into like one source, otherwise you're going to limit the amount of space that you've got in your game.
Like, oh, now I have to do this, now I have to do this. Like, it adds a lot of variety to things. So it's really important that different content has different rewards that are possible from it, for sure.
I have a few questions about specific skills. Now, there's been a lot of new skills highlighted, a lot of combination of skills, a lot of skill modification with a few of the supports you've highlighted. But there are a few skills in PoE1 that I feel have kind of become the game for some players. So I wanted to kind of point those out, and if you can, maybe mention if there will be a skill like it in PoE2. So first up on the list as...
Hold on. I think PoE2 can always steal more from roguelikes. I don't know if you guys know, but this is coming from the well-renowned developer of Tiny Rogues on Steam. It's crazy. Like the recent lab changes, crafting could be a bunch of choose one of 3 pop-ups. Yep. I 100% agree. 100%. Like either through Expedition, like you guys said with ROG. It totally makes sense to me. What the fuck? Oh, never mind. My best of friend, though. I would, yes, absolutely. Let us trade together. You and me, my friend. Give me your currency and I will give you scam. Where is it? Rachel? Memory? Oh, it's here. Oh, big scam. Dude, I'm scamming this guy. It's the second time he's trading. Big scam, my scam. We're back in business.
Probably many people might expect me to ask you is Righteous Fire. Will we have a Righteous Fire in PoE2?
Yeah, of course.
There will be Righteous Fire.
Will
it work exactly identically? No, but ideally it should feel like the same type of thing, and the flavor
just
of
for
Righteous
beast
Fire
rotations,
should all come across completely. But ideally we can do it in a way where it feels like there's interesting combos with it, has interesting mechanics that can work alongside it and so on. So yeah, like absolutely there will be Righteous Fire. And ideally there should be any kind of really iconic thing from PoE1, like any kind of iconic skill. We will really need to find a place for it in PoE2 as well. We did have a discussion about the exact mechanics of how Righteous Fire works.
Nico, you're not going to play.
So hopefully you guys will enjoy it when you when we talk about it. I believe it should be in the Templar announcement at some point.
Okay. Well, closer to home for me is about minions. Now you have mentioned that minions exist in PoE2, so we know that already. But I was personally curious if there is
rank 1 refund?
More of a push towards temporary minions, as there kind of is now in PoE1. Like the scaling from passive minions has kind of fallen off over the years in recent patches, and the scaling for temporary minions has actually increased over that same time span.
Right. I have a lot of ideas around minions, and we're going to be talking about that when we announce the Witch stuff later. I guess next year, technically still. So there's going to be a big discussion about that, and we've got a lot of features there. We put a lot of thought into minions. It's obviously one of those things that action RPG people, like there are a certain class of people who play action RPGs who that's all they want to play. So we have to make sure that we've got a really, really good minion story.
The degenerates, the animals.
Yeah, because of that,
minions
are going to get a lot of attention, and you'll see that fairly soon, I think.
Now, one thing with minions that kind of comes as a drawback in PoE1 is kind of the visual clarity, where once I have more of a powerful summoner.
Okay, so I actually talked to a bunch of PoE people, including Jonathan, when it came to visual clarity and some of the artists and everything at ExileCon 1, and that was a big concern for me. I was like, how are you guys going to make it so that, with everything being mixed in together and like maps being this like blob of everything else in the game, how are you going to make things distinct and not have this visual clarity issue and whatever? And their response pretty much every time was just, we're just gonna make shit look cool. That's it. There was no like, oh yeah, color this, color that, put it together, maybe change it. No, they were, every time it was just like, dude, brother, man, Bill, yo, it's gonna fucking be so hot, dude. I did not hear a single idea
for visual clarity. I don't think they give any shits. So let's hear the political answer from Jonathan.
And I'm summoning more minions and they have like more AoE in their attacks, I feel like the visual clarity of just me being able to see the boss mechanics kind of starts going down and down. In PoE1 they has this like setting which is like bloom, but that affects both things. It affects both the boss mechanics in some cases as well as like your skills and the minion skills. So there's no like great way to kind of maintain full clarity of the boss mechanics. But I am stronger, so I don't know. It's kind of been a trade-off in PoE1. Is there some address to this in PoE2?
There isn't like a specific technical, like here's the specific solution, but I can tell you that visual clarity of minions is like the primary concern that I have around minions for sure when looking at the stuff, because that is how there is a certain feeling you want with minions where you kind of like in PoE1 it just feels like chaos a lot of the time. Like there's just shit everywhere. Like it doesn't feel like there's a front line, as it were, and things like there's these kinds of issues. I want to try and make it feel a bit different in PoE2. So we do have a lot of like stuff around this, and even if you looked at the whiteboard in my office right now, like half the issues on there are visual clarity to do with minion issues right now. So yeah, it's definitely a concern. It's just a matter of like just better design really when it comes to what the minions' abilities look like and this kind of stuff. As well as just there's just a lot of it's kind of like 1,000 individual subtle things that kind of add together to make things to have more clarity. And that's kind of true across PoE2 in general. Like there's
He's
a
not
lot
answering
of
the
focus on trying to
question.
make sure that there's visual clarity with the skills, even though they look really modern and cool, there's still clarity. Like because we're get the opportunity to have a bit of a reset here graphically, it means that we can consider very carefully like what slots around the enemies do the different effects go in, and like how can we make sure that like we're kind of making sure, okay, like if something's like on like a, and this may actually not be like 100% correct, but it's like if something's on the like blade of the weapon, then that is always a herald effect, for example. Like nothing else is taking that slot on the character, so you kind of know that like like these kind of things are kind of what we're trying to do to make sure that everything has its place, and you kind of always can see things without having to have too much overlap. And hopefully, I mean, sure, a little bit of that goes out the door a little bit when you start having MTXs heavily involved, but at least without those, like the visual clarity should be very good if we're doing our job well.
Okay. So bit of a subject swap here. In PoE,
I don't know. It's like impossible. I can totally understand. Like, there's no way to make it look good. I wonder if they could. Because Lost Ark did that. Like, you can add like borders to things, and especially having it on your character is useful in that game with how like horrible the visual clarity is for dungeons and whatnot, where there's just a lot of mobs. And it kind of works, but in PoE it's just gonna look like there's a bunch of stickmen running around. I don't know. It's literally impossible. Well, I think it's more so, it's not really about like MTXs and what the player looks like and what the player does, but more so about like the enemies standing out on top of those effects. I think that's really the big difference. Like, yeah, there's a lot of MTXs that cover shit up, and that's really not gonna change. But if you're actively trying to avoid those things and you've got a build that has a lot of visual clarity, the mobs really should be something that just pops. And a lot of times it doesn't. And I think that should be the main focus. But even then, there's just no way to address it. How are you going to make a Roa in Act 1 look distinct from, whatever in Act 10 of the same color? It's tough. Maybe you could change the layering. Maybe. I mean, I'm sure that there's like ways of doing it. It's just, are any of these ways of doing it like actually realistic and feasible? I don't know.
When it comes to designing a character, a lot of it kind of has to do with putting check marks on defensive goals. So the first round of goals is like avoiding lockouts, so you don't get stunned, don't get frozen. And then the second one is usually don't get killed by physical damage, because physical damage is unique in a way where more of it just ruins your ability to stack armor. And the third one is just like, does this character get one shot from typical stuff that happens to it? Is this kind of going to be a similar checklist in PoE2, or is it a different approach to defenses?
I don't know that it's not particularly easy to necessarily avoid that, but what I would say is that I would hope that we don't get to the point where you have to feel like every character needs to be completely immune.
I mean,
to
you can
certain
play shit
mechanics.
build, Nico.
Like ideally, it should be a reasonable choice to choose between: is this something I'm mitigating, or is this something I'm completely preventing? So that should always feel like it's a choice. But at the same time, like having certain things you need to be able to deal with as part of a build is, like part of the, I guess, the trade-off you're making when it comes to like, how
Sure.
like you need a bit of tension to make defense, like to make it so that you don't just make a complete glass cannon with zero attention paid to defense at all. You do need to some extent to have, like how am I going to deal with this particular problem? So I think that will still be a thing. But I can't promise that the exact details around it will be the same in PoE2.
I think already the fact that you need to, the fight resets if you die, and if you portal out, that takes time. That already inherently is going to demand just an entire rework of everything that Jonathan just said. But because realistically speaking, I mean, the reason why people stopped making glass cannons is because building defenses became a lot easier, first of all. And secondly, it, like, the content kind of warranted it. But when the glass cannons were at their peak, the Mathil builds were really popping off. It's because there was no baseline punishment that was reasonable enough for people to stop doing it. That's for a multitude of reasons. For instance, getting from level 90 to level 100 wasn't a substantial amount of power for any character, and it took a substantial amount of time, so people didn't consider it. But now when you think about it, if you can get 10 extra passive points from level 90 to level 100, that's like potentially 30 to 50 in some cases % more damage. That's kind of a big freaking deal, right? And so if you have these systems now as a baseline that punish you because you don't get to actually progress, I think reworking a lot of the defensive stuff would work in tangent. Is that in tangent? No, tangent is different. Tangent is wow wee. That's what I'm doing right now. I'm having a little tangent. In tandem. That's the word. I'm having a little tangent about tandem. Parallel. Yeah, sure. That word. So I think they can already do so much more. But like, yeah, having devs be punishing already is going to make it so that I think people just won't be able to build glass cannons, which was a big problem for softcore for a long time. The difference between like hardcore and softcore characters was so vast that people would just break content completely. But now both hardcore and softcore characters are broken and they break content, but it doesn't seem like GGG cares anymore because they're like, we have this new thing.
This is honestly something that I am not myself as involved with, I would say, as some other people on the team. I mean, obviously I still kind of like, talk about the stuff, but, people like Rory and Mark tend to be a little bit more, like knowing about, like have specific thoughts around that stuff.
Well, maybe this isn't too apt of a question, but I'll ask it anyway. Will you perhaps eventually be able to trivialize a mechanic entirely?
Okay, Alk's take was good about PoE2. The devs doesn't realize how hard it is for many people to use 3 to 5 different skills with weapon swap. Alkaiser didn't play PoE2, right? I don't think he realizes how smooth it is. It is pristine. I was one of those people who was like, ooh, it swaps passives and it swaps your weapon and it's like an active thing and you have to set it up and blah. And then I played it. It's seamless. It's beautiful. It's fucking perfect. It just works. It flows flawlessly. It's glorious. So yeah, it is still clicking more buttons for sure. But that's just going to be PoE2. You're playing the game around combos. You're always going to have to combine abilities. PoE2, if you're somebody who just wants to hold down right click and it teleports you and kills everything on the screen, that's just not gonna happen. I don't think that's the idea. I'm sure that it will still happen for some skills, like if you're playing, I don't know, SRS or something, and they remove all the buffs and debuffs. Well, that's not applicable, because for minions you always have buffs and debuffs. I don't know, something. You're just holding down one button. I'm sure that's gonna be a thing, but I think they're actively seeking to avoid it. And then make it so that you're still either clicking, like before you were clicking those buttons because you were spamming like movement ability and whatever. Now everything gets replaced by spacebar in terms of like defensive utility, and then you have like your combinations of attacks that move you around, and you can interrupt with your spacebar, and that just works with the game. And you're just like mixing and weaving and everything else that you're taking care of, like weapon swapping, different abilities, and passive tree swapping, that's something that happens automatically, and you just have it set up prior to going into the fight.
Like, I know the stun mechanic in PoE2 is much more sophisticated than PoE1, but are you able to make a character that's completely ignoring stuns of all kinds if you want?
There should always be a way to do that. The cost of it should always be something, right? You know what I mean? So, like, I mean, there's absolutely will be a unique that's going to be like, you can't key stunned, right? There's going to be uniques like that.
Okay.
There may be a keystone that does like that does that in exchange for some kind of big downside.
Reverse that. Because they said that they absolutely do not want anything like that previously. But I guess, yeah, I mean, it's a lot more reasonable. Well, then fudge, then my solution isn't going to make it.
Downside in order for that to be able to happen. And then, of course, you know, you should be able to invest in stun reduction
to the point where it no longer
phases you as well, right? This kind of thing should be possible. So that should always be possible. It's just always like cost benefit, right? Like, what are you, what are you trading for that?
In terms of character design, I think it's maybe, at least for me, one of the best thing that PoE1 does, where it always seems difficult to get enough of everything. Like, you can make a character that does millions or even like 1 billion damage, but you can only really do that if you...
I don't think Kripp played this league, just so we're clear. I think he did play, but only like a little bit off stream. I feel like this league is just whoever you are and whatever you do, you can get enough of everything. I don't know. I think he just doesn't play trade. I mean, even on SSF, I mean, I guess it depends on what you consider of like enough of everything. Because if you're playing hardcore, you set up like the baseline defenses, and everything else that you pile on top of it is just damage. So I guess different people are going to have a different perspective on like how much is enough of damage. And technically you could argue that you can never have enough. So that means that you're always trading it for like something else that you're setting up, because you can lower the amount of defense. He has been playing a lot. He did play it to like level 95. I mean, I don't know if playing to 95 is like a lot. The SSF 99. Then I'm surprised. I mean, I guess it's always going to also depend on what you're going to be playing, right? For somebody who's playing with like Penance Brand, that's going to be a very different experience from somebody who's playing Essence Drain, right? In Ruthless? Nah, he's not doing Ruthless. No way. He did say he found 30k alts. I don't think he meant this league. I mean, maybe. Who knows anymore, to be honest. He has 2 characters, 99 and 95. Okay, he has played a lot then. Yeah, and I'm surprised. I mean, I think he's just talking like generally. Because that's always really been the case for PoE. If anything, like what I said was an offhand comment. Because that really, what he's saying is true for PoE. I just think for this league in particular, you can really pick and choose whatever the hell you want, and you can get enough of everything in just about any scenario. Other than, yeah, like Chaos Dots. Maybe Cold Dot to a certain extent, but not even.
Is this going to be a similar approach to PoE2 character design?
Absolutely. And this has actually come up when we were discussing the tree about like things like, okay, so this is another tree philosophy thing. Is like, okay, should it be
the same way you do when I play trade? Yeah, maybe
you get a variety of things on the tree is because there just aren't enough nodes for a given thing to be able to do that, or should it be that there's always enough nodes to be able to allocate for a given thing? It's just that you don't want to do that because you've got other concerns that you need to do. And I think it's the second one that's important. Like, if you really want to allocate every single point into, you know, some particular stat that's, you know, freeze reduction or something random like that, then there will be nodes for you to do that. It's just that you don't want to do that because, you know, that's not the only important thing. And I think that's kind of just generally how we've look at our philosophy around this stuff.
All right. So some people aren't quite aware because it's one class here, one class there, and we haven't seen a lot of like the trailers for the classes that already exist in PoE1, which we have at least heard of a little bit that they're being redesigned in some ways. But eventually, we're going to have 36 ascendancy classes in PoE2. And my first question is, if we have like twice as many ascendancy classes, is there going to be a different design in like the lifetime of a character when a new league comes out or a new content update comes out? Like
That's a good question.
Are,
Wow.
are you expecting players to play like many characters in each season, or like one or two, kind of how they are in PoE1?
I think it would just be like how it is in PoE1, honestly. The fact that there's a lot of options there, I mean, the intention is for PoE2 to last a long time, right? So like ideally, like having more classes like that just means that it's going to be a lot longer before you have run out of stuff to try. So ultimately, that's the reason why there's so many, that we just want to have a lot of stuff that you can to play around with.
Just more stuff.
So yeah, I imagine that in each league it's going to be 1 to 2 characters, just like it is in PoE1.
Mm-hmm. In PoE1, it's taking like dedicated players that are focusing on leveling. I'm not going to say some days, which are like the fastest times, but let's say like a week to hit max level. Is that kind of like a goalpost that you guys are trying to hit in PoE2 as well in terms of the pacing for a character?
I think it should take a bit longer than a week. I sort of feel like I'd want to go back a little bit in terms of how long it takes to be more like what it was like
spicy
sort of 3 to 4 years ago, I would say. Where it was a bit longer. But I mean, it'll take people a while. Just
3 to 4 years ago. I mean, anything past Breach took like nothing compared to before. It was 4 years ago. 3 to 4 years ago. This wasn't Breach already Vol Fireball, the league? That was Breach, no? And Vol Spark. So it would have been... Okay, Synthesis and Legion. Yeah. This game was already crazy. I feel like there's methods that you can get level 100 like way faster now. But for the average player, I feel like really nothing has changed. Like on average, people are going to be higher level quicker, of course. But unless you're specifically doing it, I feel like the game's been pretty much the same for a while now. It's just that now, if you really want to level, you have like so many options to do so very, very quickly. I mean, I don't even remember when really. I mean, it would have been Breach actually, when the game like really started pumping, right? Like game was ramping. In Parandus already, the game was ramping. Parandus was a big one because people had like big items. Harby mechanic was insane. Nah, I can tell you because I know who was the first level 100 on hardcore in Harbinger. It was me. And it took me 18 days of playing so much that I had to fucking take a break after because my hand completely broke. I was playing non-stop. It was ridiculous. And it took me 18 days. Because Uber Dan died to Volatile? No, it was Uber Elite. And no, I was ahead of him when he died. By a significant margin. Also, you can't say like, oh yeah, this guy only won because some other guy fucking lost. I won! Me! Okay? Don't try to take this away from me. I love that one. That was a lot of effort. It was a good one. And yeah, that was 18 days already. But that was like genuinely like 18 to 20 hours a day, every fucking day. It was hard as fuck. So already that was fairly quick. Compared that to like, dude, Onslaught was like 2 months. Hey, Agnieszka. How much longer till the end of this? O. Jeszcze długo. Co tak brwiami machasz? Później, Aga, później. Co? Tak, dobrze. wiem, za godzinę czy co?
Just to sort of learn the game, I think. So I suspect the first time people play the content.
Why are you moving your eyebrows so much? It's because she got her eyebrows done. And the first day, whenever she gets her eyebrows done, it's very dark. So she looks like it always reminds me of that guy from car wash guy, Breaking Bad, dude. I always think of this guy. Like, it looks fine the next day, but this guy is just, I think about this every time. So every time I see it, I'm just like, ooh, what's going on? Shit.
It's going to take them quite a while. Like, as I was saying before, like, the first time I beat a boss earlier, it was like 5 minutes, and then like that went down on my second time to like 2 minutes. So even just from that perspective, like, and it slowly improves. So I think that people will get faster and faster. So I mean,
Faster.
I honestly don't know
More.
at this point how long it will take people the first time through the campaign, and I suspect it will take them a very long time. But
Very
it'll
long.
get faster.
What is a very long time?
And who are we talking about, too? Who are people?
Honestly, I honestly don't know for sure, because we don't have like the entire, like, not every area is like
Because they said
fully.
initially they said that they wanted to take as long as the regular PoE campaign, the first one, because it was supposed to work together and everything. And obviously a lot has changed since then, and I don't think they've been really addressing it, but it was the idea,
Like it's not playable. I mean, all the areas are there, but they're not playable in the sense that like if you have bad monsters, like when I say bad, I mean like monsters that don't have like all their abilities and stuff like that in an area, it's just boring. So like nobody wants to play those areas. So that means that we don't really have like proper progression testing. Like we've polished the first half of each act kind of thing, and so we haven't got like a sort of full, like, you can just play through the whole game to do progression testing yet. So that means that, well, I can't actually say how long it will take, but I honestly believe that like for an average player, I mean, like, got to be at least 40, 50 hours, I think.
What?
I imagine that's how long it will take sort of your average player to.
What did he just say? What? Average player or like average gamer? First time trying? What?
An average player, I mean, like, got to be at least 40, 50 hours, I think.
Oh,
Is it 4 to 5 hours? I don't think so. Average 7 wife player? I mean, even then, even average 7 wife players, I don't think they get even remotely close. I think if you're completely new to PoE, it takes you like between 30 to 50, If you're an average PoE player now, I think the campaign takes you like 10 to 12? Okay, I should say 12 to 15. But I want to say 10, but there's probably a lot of people who are like, they're like a lot more casual, and I'm including console players and everything. So I would say like 12 to 15. 10 to 12. Yeah, I was going to say 10 to 12 originally, but I think it is a little bit more for like the average PoE player. So I don't know if he's saying like the average gamer or the average PoE player. Because if it's the average PoE player, it's 40 to 50. I can hear people fucking slitting their wrists around the world right now, dude. Because that is the people who don't like the campaign. I don't know. It's Joe over for them. I don't know. But even for somebody like me, right? I mean, I haven't done racing and whatever, so if I'm just casually leveling a character, it's gonna take me to get like a hardcore map ready character with everything done. On average, I would say that it's going to take me like on league start, like 6 hours. Past the league start, probably somewhere between like 4.5 to 5 hours. So the difference between that and like the 12-hour average is really not that big. So if we take that and we assume that he meant 40, 50 hours for the average PoE player, I don't know if I'm going to be okay with doing the campaign for 20 hours or whatever that is. But I don't think that's what he meant. I think he meant just like average gamer or something for the first time or something like. There's no way. I mean, maybe it's just that extensive, you know? They have been working on it for a long time. Holy shit. How long did you take this league? On league launch? I mean, it must have been under 6 hours, I would imagine. But like, I am stubborn as, like, I don't care if my ability is gonna be weak or if I'm using a shit setup or whatever. I just want to play like my skill as early as possible, and that's it. And that's what I did. And even then, it took me like under 6 hours. But I mean, yeah. If I can't, like, I can, you know, if I'm like focused and practicing and I'm a gamer, then I would imagine on League Start it wouldn't take me longer than like 4.5. But again, I don't know what he was like specifically talking about. There's just no way. PoE campaign took a professional game reporter from well-renowned IGN, 72 hours. Yeah, but again, it's like how you could say the same thing about me and how long it takes me to do the campaign in Last Epoch, for instance. It takes me forever because you know why? I'm not playing the game. I'm just fucking around with abilities and figuring stuff out. So like, could I complete the campaign in Last Epoch in like 4 hours? Oh yeah, easily. But do I, well, especially now, isn't it like way shorter now? I think you can do it in like 2 hours and you can be running monoliths, no? But, you know, on average, it's probably going to take me somewhere around 10 because I'm just fucking around. I don't know. I think this is a misquote. Something is wrong here.
Wow.
That's crazy.
I imagine that's how long it will take sort of your average player to get through. Like, it could be longer, honestly, for people who like haven't played an action RPG before, probably.
Okay.
So that
Okay.
kind of thing,
Well, hold on. I paused
like
too early. Okay. He meant like the average player. That makes sense then. Like the average player of video games, not the average player of Path of Exile. Then yeah, then we're totally fine. Because he asked him specifically about like PoE players, and then he responded with like players, you know? So I would imagine it's like pretty similar. Because mamma mia, that would be crazy.
Half an hour per zone when you include like, you know, fighting bosses. Like, I sort of want people to die.
Okay, so
like,
it is the same as PoE 1. Holy moly, that would be crazy.
Because they haven't learned the mechanics yet. Like, it should feel that way when you're kind of playing through the first time.
I paused too early.
So that
My bad.
mean, you know, like that kind of thing. So like,
I'm a bad reactor.
It's just a little bit harder. Like, you know,
I'm learning.
But the thing is, I think PoE 1 may even be that hard for people who just play the game for the first time now. It's just that once you played it, you know, how many times people have played it, it becomes trivial to the point where you're like, okay, I could never die to this thing.
Dude, this conversation makes me realize how fucking insane like Act 1 and PoE 1 is right now. Act 1 is just so... Like, how do they ever get new play? How does anybody ever get out of Act 1? If you're a new player, there's just no... It's so out of this world right now. And it would be fine if it was fun in like a fun way. Like, hey, the bosses are hard. Like, Brutus is fun. But to get to Brutus, you gotta get through the Sea Witches in Submerged. You gotta get through the Roas. You gotta get through Hellrake, and you don't understand that you can target him. You gotta get through, like... goats on ledge and on climb. Then you gotta get through like puncture mobs and skelly mages in prison. It's like, and then you finally kill Brutus, you're finally done, you're ready to pump, and guess what? Now you gotta get through goats again, you gotta get through flicker strike mobs, you gotta get through exploders, and then you get to Merville, and she's just absolutely abolishes you too. Because of like, it's kind of crazy how insane PoE 1 campaign is. I feel like if you're a new player, previously PoE 1, like Act 1 campaign would have taken you probably like 3 to 4 hours if you're a completely new PoE player, and then would take you, other acts would take you longer because you're figuring out more and more stuff. But now, if you're a new player, dude, I don't know how you get out of Act 1 within the first like 6 hours. There's just no way. There's no shot. On top of all the other stuff that you're trying to figure out, which like further compounds. It's crazy.
The fact that you actually, you know,
so much.
You have to restart the boss if you die to it now. It will force you to actually learn the mechanics and kind of, you know, work out these things during your first playthrough.
I think all acts equally. Okay, yeah, because you never
yeah,
get out of Act 1.
All
So
right.
you wouldn't know.
Well, that is it for the questions that I had personally, but I have scoured the internet for unanswered questions, and I have picked a few up from chat, and if you guys want to post your question in chat, if it's at least different enough from what we've already discussed
Post
or
your
what
questions,
I have,
chat.
I'll maybe try to include...
Actually, post your questions, by the way, because I will be doing an interview with Jonathan as well. I can't promise you guys when it's going to be. I was going to be before New Year's, but there are other people participating, and timing. So, you guys got actual questions for Jonathan, come up with them, and I'll maybe ask them if they're good ones. If you're going to ask about the auction house, I will ban you. So just keep that in mind. We will be doing an interview. There are other people, you know? My handler is going to be there, and my other handler too.
Include it near the end. But yeah, we people do have to be in places eventually, so we don't have Jonathan forever. But yes, with that in mind, I want to ask some of the questions. They might be a little bit less researched than some of my own, so might brace yourself for some short answers.
Jonathan's going away soon.
So here we go. I found this one on a YouTube comment, I believe. I think it was on the official thread of this interview on the PoE forums. So tell us about the die system you mentioned in 2019. I don't know anything about this, so please.
Yeah, I guess I probably mentioned that back in ExileCon back in 2019. It's something that we could still do, but it's not honestly something that I've kind of thought about for a little while.
I don't remember that at all.
I know it's something that a lot of players are very keen for, but like it's kind of not really on my radar at this point. Like we're just focusing on content,
It's
really.
just not a possibility.
But there's nothing really preventing us from doing it. It would just be a matter of marking up all the
Submit it
artworks
to
and,
my
you know, the parts
DMs,
that get,
Nico.
modified and so on. So it's just a bunch of work there.
If it has the word Flicker Strike in it, I won't.
I don't know if really it would be there at release. It's kind of, I know that would be disappointing for a lot of players, but it's just kind of one of those things that has kind of fallen by the wayside a little bit as we've been grinding out on a bunch more content, unfortunately.
All right.
So I mean, like coloring
99%
your shit.
of PoE2 misgivings have been about the gameplay pace. Now, you've kind of adjusted this a little bit, but I kind of want to ask it again and ask you how is it current relative to maybe what we've seen a few months ago at ExileCon? Is that still kind of what we're expecting, or is that, as you mentioned, a bit slowed down so people can kind of see?
I can ask about the one button thing, but probably no, guys.
So I guess I kind of don't really. Like, okay, so a lot of people are like, oh, you're slowing it down to do this, or you're kind of, like, they have a lot of things like that. But I think really when it comes to when we're like, so this actually relates to a little bit what I was saying before about how we haven't been able to do full progression testing yet. Which is that what that means is that when we're balancing an area to do a demonstration or for ExileCon, the demos and all that sort of stuff, we kind of just like, we make a character that's about what we think it should be for this area, and then we kind of balance the monsters from that point for the demo to just kind of hit like what we want, where we expect to sort of be able to understand the mechanics and kind of like give a good showing to how the class should be. I think at ExileCon, it probably was balanced a little hard. But the thing is, each demo is kind of its own thing because of the fact that, like as I said, we don't have a full like sort of progression test through the whole game.
Well, the problem at ExileCon, see, even that doesn't really fully like highlight the issue that the ExileCon demo was hard. It was mostly about items. Like the items clearly weren't adjusted to what the new items need to be. Like for instance, the base items that you got for like a level 30 character, which I think was the Marauder, didn't have any HP on them. But then you would find items that would have like 200 HP flat. So you're running around with a melee character that's got 500 HP, and every HP item you get gives you like 50% more. But a lot of times you wouldn't be able to get those items because you actually have to drop them. And now you're unable to also scale like through your skill tree because you didn't have access to that either. So it wasn't even that like the content was overtuned or that the characters were out of balance. It was like the itemization was completely out of whack, you know? People were just running around with literally nothing. And I mean, that would absolutely be the case too, that, you know, even with the new gems, if you're just trying to get to whatever act on a naked character, you're probably going to struggle if you're not experienced with the content that you're doing, you know?
Yet. So, ExileCon, like, because of these demos are just like how they are. Effectively, what it is just like me and Mark will play it, and then we'll be like, did we get through it too quickly or didn't we? And then adjust accordingly.
Yeah.
So we just adjust it until it feels fun to us. So I think when people maybe sort of ascribe a little bit too much to that sometimes. That being said, I think that it's probably best to look at the pacing stuff to be more like when we were discussing earlier with maps and what the median player versus the 1% players would be doing. I think we still want to make sure that there's still a 10 times disparity in efficiency between a good and a bad player in that situation. So that would certainly imply that there can be certainly a pretty good amount of pace you can get up to. But what I do think is also bad, and I guess this is another philosophical thing, is that I don't think it's really good when you someone opens up Path of Exile on Twitch. Good. They look at what the game looks like at the absolute 1% end of it, and it just looks like utter, just like what is even going on the screen. You know, it's just like shit is everywhere. There's like there's no visual clarity. I cannot tell what the hell is going on, and the boss melts in like 2 seconds. You know what I mean? Like I don't think that's really very good either. So you do need to be able to get a lot more efficiency than the average player, but we do have to be a little bit careful. But I don't know, like I guess all of that is to say that like it's a little bit hard to say exactly what the pace will be like in maps at this point. I have no doubt that the peak will still be high, but it may not be as high as it currently is in PoE1. I think that's very likely. But at the same time, like it's really important that people feel like they're able to break the game. Like you want people to feel like, oh, I'm breaking the game right now. I'm like got an insane amount of projectiles, like way more than I should be able to have. Like,
see, but that's the thing. You can feel like you're breaking the game without actually doing it. Like we don't need to go from 1 to 100. We can go from like 1 to 1.2, and it's still going to feel like a 20% increase. You know, so it's like I feel like that should be the threshold. Like not 10 times or 100 times faster. It's like just a little bit, you know, and you still feel like you're doing so much better than the average guy.
Like all this kind of stuff. So yeah, I guess there's a bit of a hedged non-answer, which I worry is a bit of a problem here.
Hold on, chat's getting commercials. I'll wait. Fuck it. You guys should be using your Twitch Prime every 30 days to support the stream for free and gain access to cool badges and emotes. All you got to do is click the subscribe button, see if a free Twitch Prime token is available, so that now you can go around using RaizQT on everybody else's channel. What is it? It's speed L. And then hold up. I'm doing it. It's RaizQT and then speed right. I'm unleashing it. You could do that. And you're going to get an ad-free viewing experience. But they can't hear me. That's true. They are getting ads right now. So not wrong. Everybody else who isn't getting ads is already a sub. Feels bad. Correct? You guys are remembering to use Twitch Prime. Oh, the guy's getting the ads? No. Yeah, I know. Toffol, very good. Very good job. Nice, Zexo. Thanks very much for the 2 months.
For 2 months.
Why isn't it Raiz art anymore? Because it was triggering me. I'm not a sub and not getting ads. Good. That's the way that it should be. Fuck me, dude. Royal Desk Star. Thank you for the 6 months, man.
Royal Desk
Love you,
Star
buddy.
just resubscribed for 6 months.
This is such an interesting interview. Again, I will be doing an interview with Jonathan. And like the very first thing that I said about it, and the most exciting thing by far in my eyes, is the fact that for the first time in like the history of doing podcasts for Path of Exile, I'm actually going to do a podcast in which I'm like excited to talk about things I'm looking forward to rather than just things that are wrong. Because previously it's like everything that you would ever talk about is how things don't work in PoE. But now for the first time ever, the things that I don't know if they're going to work or not, I just haven't experienced them, so I won't be able to tell. But there's a lot of things that I do know they're going to work, and I'm really looking forward to them in that sense. And it's a very bizarre experience. Like, dude, I'm supposed to, I'm gonna talk about things I like. They're doing stuff that I enjoy. Like, what? Because yeah, a big part of the reason why also podcasting didn't really make sense for me anymore is because, you know, if you don't care about like the state of the game, you're not gonna hold like strong opinions whether what's happening is good or bad.
That's still partially the case now, even though I care a lot more now than I did before. Like, this patch has really revitalized things for me. But I mean, it's still kind of... It's like, clear speed, MF. Fuck it. PoE 1, you can go down the dumpster. I'm a PoE 2 Andy now. Lol, I'm a betrayer of another kind, man. Alright, are you guys done? You guys are done. Alright, I'm watching further. Dick Insider, thanks for the 33 months. That's a delayed one, but I like it. Thank you very much.
Dick Insider 27 just resubscribed.
Thanks, Dick Insider.
33 months. Hi.
Hi.
Well, it's still in development. I can't fault you for that.
Right.
The way that I asked the question was, you know, kind of seeing post-Ruthless Experiment what your thoughts may be on the matter.
And you're definitely right that it's the number one issue that people talk about PoE2. Like, the fear in the PoE 1 community is that it's just going to be super slow paced. And I don't think it will feel that way. I think that when you play it, you will have fun. Ultimately, that's all that I'm after, right? Like, so it's actually interesting. There's been cases of this, right? Where, like, I was playing the Mercenary in the demo for the demo that we recorded, and then I went back and I played what was it I was playing? I think it might have been the Warrior, actually. Afterwards, the demo character we had at ExileCon, I was like, man, this is way too slow. So even just from me, like, it can often be the case that my opinions change as I'm playing as I'm playing things. So it's really going to come down to the progression testing to kind of see how we feel. But I guess the guiding star, I suppose, at the end of the day, has to be that when you get an item, you feel like it improved your character. Because if you don't have that, then you have nothing. So you know, like, we still have to maintain that feeling through the whole game, and there has to be a feeling of progress as you go through.
Then imagine, like, a Diablo 4 developer listening to this, and they're like, "Oh yeah, if you get an item, it improves your character. Good. Let's do that." And then they release it, and it's like, yeah, but every time you level up, it decreases the power of your character. So now you're just making your guy weaker and weaker. It's like, they only caught like half of it. They don't get the whole equation. It's like, yeah, there's a reason why there's a cap to all this stuff, you know? Shit. Like, I could choose to go to tier 16s. T16s don't choose to come to me, Diablo 4.
So yeah, like, that's we'll I guess end up where we end up, where it honestly, and it may sound a bit silly, but it's like, it just has to feel fun to me, right? Like, I have to play it and feel like this feels fun.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't feel fun to me, then I'll increase the numbers. And that's really what it comes down to.
Jonathan.
I have a question about how much of an endgame map is the boss in it, I suppose. You've kind of answered this slightly through your mastery of, you know, repeatedly going up against these bosses and just defeating them faster and faster. But I guess we can broadly ask you, perhaps, how much of a map that you do in the endgame of PoE2 should the boss be?
Yeah, so I think that in terms of drops, at the very least, so we've actually discussed the drops in particular.
Oh, that's interesting. Drops,
I think that 1/3 of the map should be boss drops. 1/3 of the map should just be regular monsters, and 1/3 of the map should be other events and things that come up, like league content and things like that. Which isn't to say necessarily that every map will always have stuff like that, but on average across many maps, it should be about 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. And
that's crazy, because in PoE right now, it's like the boss is like 1/27th. The actual map drops are like fucking 1/27th as well, and then everything else is like, I mean, 27th is like 270th. I mean, honestly, bosses can be good, but you have to, I mean, the same way that you have to spec into everything. At least on hardcore, bosses are pretty decent. I don't know how it is on softcore, but on hardcore, I would say, if you're not doing MF, if you're just running the map and you're actually spec'd into bosses on top of like other league mechanics, bosses actually are, I would say they are like 1/3, maybe 1/4. Like, actually. But then once you start specking into juicing and everything, yeah, that gets really heavily skewed.
And ideally, that should roughly map onto the amount of time that you spend doing those things as well. So that's kind of my view on it, at least. Is, yeah, roughly 1/3, I would say, should be the map boss.
I don't know if you're fully comfortable answering this one, but inquiring minds are curious. Why did you guys decide to continue working on 1 and 2 at the same time, like separately, rather than evolving PoE1 to PoE2? I know it was like a big announcement that it's going to be its own project, but I guess people really didn't get the why sufficiently.
They should have watched my stream. I fundamentally laid out the why and how and everything, and then at ExileCon, okay? We're talking about, because we were on the panel that talked about predictions, and we are talking to each other what are going to be the first things that we're going to say to each other. And guess what? I'm talking about how, like, my prediction is going to be that PoE1 and PoE2 is going to be separate. And GGG people turn around like 3 minutes before we go live and they go, you should have a different prediction. I go, what? Why? Did I guess it? And they go, just don't talk about that. And I go, what? So that, listen, they should have been listening to the stream. They would have known why. They would have known. I'm so proud of that, you know?
Just resubscribed for 19
because it makes so much sense. It's so smart. It's so much better. It's so much better. Fake story, literally. I mean, you could have just watched my stream. I talked about it before going to ExileCon too. But that was my biggest thing, dude. And they fucked me. Kinda. I mean, to be honest. I still could have said it. Actually, even on the cast, Ziggy asks me and he goes, he said something like, Raiz, what's your prediction? I know that your predictions have been thwarted or whatever word he used because reasons, but yeah,
subscribed for 76 months.
that was a big part of it. Oh no, Nico's DMing me. Zonda with the 76 months. Thank you, Zonda. Thank you, Plagues. Thanks, guys. Enjoyed the sexo. Nico, is this actually your question? Will GGG make it easier to make and understand builds without the need of third party?
Sexo.
Yes. Wait, what sexo? I'm listening. Oh, very cool, Chris. Very nice. Will GGG make it easier to make and understand builds without the need of third party simulations and websites wikis? See, this is the problem with questions like this, Nico. It's an absolutely valid question that's been answered 400 billion times. This is the problem with a lot of the questions from PoE people. Because I can answer this for you. No. No is the answer. I am saying no. And GGG will say, we always strive to do a little bit better in that regard and contain information within the game. But realistically speaking, there's really no. No, the answer is no. It's a good question. It's just been answered a lot of times, dude. And the answer is no. I don't know. What did you say about D4 bad on ExileCon? They gave me a high five.
Please ask about
I thought it was funny.
Binds. Multiple keys for the same skill, changing left/right click key binds, that kind of thing. Save my hands, you are my only hope, Prej.
Sure. I mean, that would be like a question after all the good ones, but it's a valid question. It's just the sort of thing that I think you should be asking probably later, already when the game's maybe like closer to launch and whatever. Because that's just like a functionality thing, It's not really... I think I'm going to be asking a lot of gameplay-oriented stuff, so we'll see. We'll see what other people are asking, because I know there's another podcast that they're doing as well.
So it really comes down to, we want to be able to make whatever changes we want to make without it becoming a problem for the existing community. And when we first announced in 2019 what we were planning on doing, I don't think we appreciated at the time the degree to which the changes would actually change the game.
Oh.
And so it really just came down to, we had people in the office who were like, I'm really worried that the game, I'm talking about people in the QA team and things like that. They were just really worried. I'm worried that the game that you make won't necessarily be the path of Exile that I like, right? I mean, they still look at what we're doing and, they like what we're doing. But there was some worry there. Mm-hmm. And so when I heard that, I kind of thought about it pretty hard for a while. I talked to Mark quite a bit about it. And we kind of said, we really just wanted to be free to be able to let the games diverge without having to constantly work. Because I worried that the decisions that we wanted to make for people, I didn't want PoE1 to hold PoE2 back as far as like having to make balance decisions. Like we didn't want to have things like where we're like, oh, we can't change this because then all these.
I think it also goes the other way. You really don't want PoE2 to hold PoE1 back either. I think that's important to mention, that it's not just like one way. It's like that PoE2 is something that's only ever a bad thing for PoE1.
These players will get angry or things like that. We want,
because yeah, the games will be different for sure, but you don't want the PoE1 people to lose their game, but you also want the PoE2 people to get a new game that can be played by PoE1 players as well.
We want to be kind of free to be able to just like make whatever changes we wanted to make. And I think the PoE1 compatibility idea was just sort of starting to become a thing where like, oh, we can't change this because it would, break this or break that or whatever it was.
Yes.
So, that's really the reason. And once we decided that, I think we started to get a lot more crazy with the kind of changes that we were doing. So things like WASD, I don't think would have happened under the old model. I don't think we would have been able to accept that kind of thing, just because the mode we were thinking about was much too much a kind of like, we're extending the game rather than making a new game. I think it was not enough in that direction. So it really just comes down to that.
It's really good.
And as for why we want to continue supporting PoE1, well, I mean, it's still a great game. It just it's just a bit of a different game. So I think it's absolutely very valuable to support, and a lot of people will still enjoy it.
All MTXs were carry over.
I see no reason why we can't do both.
All right, that's excellent. I had a question. People were wondering about hideouts. The question they had was, are you going to have bigger or more in-depth hideouts than PoE1? But I guess the base question is, are we even going to have hideouts at all?
There'll be hideouts. For sure. Mechanically, I don't think they'll probably change too much. Maybe there's probably more we can do to make them a bit more interesting. But I still really like the whole freeform placement and decorating and all that sort of stuff. I want to keep all of that. It should work the same way. And also the PoE1 microtransaction hideouts. I want to still be there, and PoE2 you can still use them and just have that as your hideout. That should all come across.
Ooh, what about if there's like exclusive PoE2 hideouts that you can only get in PoE1 and the other way around too? I think things like that would be kind of cool for attracting people, right? Because not all content that gives you hideouts is going to be like available in the same exact way. So I wonder if that's something that they would want necessarily, or if it's something that they don't like in other games. Because I know that happens for like Blizzard games a lot of times, right? Where they're like, oh, play StarCraft and you get a Diablo 3 pet, And I think it's a real hit or miss, because like if you're a fucking StarCraft player, you don't want to be playing Diablo 3, or especially if you're a Diablo 3 player, you don't want to be playing StarCraft. So it doesn't really make sense for those people. But like PoE1 and PoE2 have such a large crossover in their audience that I feel like it could be done a lot better without necessarily feeling like predatory, but only just like a little bit more fun. But I'm sure that some people will just absolutely hate that.
A question was about losing experience on death.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty interesting, because right now in PoE1, some people like it, some people don't like it, but the landscape for it is like, if you run up against the boss where you die, you just look up how to beat the boss, or you look up a build that can beat the boss. But with none of that existing in PoE2, I feel like the death penalty, if it was the same, would feel a bit overbearing in some cases.
Yeah.
Really?
So in campaign, there's no XP penalty in PoE2.
Okay.
It's gone.
Yeah.
And that's because you're expected to die to the.
Wait, there's a penalty in the campaign for PoE1? Is that a thing?
Bosses. And
it's 5%. What the hell? 5% after Kitava. So it's 10 when you get to maps? Interesting.
Basically, as soon like the declaration of "I want you to be dying one to two times for each campaign boss for the first time," kind of implies, well, we can't have an XP penalty then. And also in PoE1, that was the only penalty that actually.
PoE vet, yeah. Sorry, man. I might be a PoE vet, but I've also never played softcore. So, I mean, I guess during BPL, that's it. Out of like the 25 or 30,000 hours that I have on PoE, I can't imagine I have over 100 hours on softcore over this whole time. That's it. Even when I started playing the game, I started on hardcore. And I died to Vol over Soul, which was the hardest boss in the entire game. I died to it like 4 times. I couldn't get to Act 3, so I just kept dying to getting fucking smashed in the head. Or to rocks. Rocks used to be crazy. People don't remember this, but basically, the way that the rocks worked was that they would fall randomly, completely randomly. There wouldn't be like a small pebble or no like delay or nothing. They would fall randomly. And when you were doing Merciless Vol, okay, because there used to be 3 difficulties and only 3 acts. When you were doing the last difficulty, so Merciless, and you were doing Vol, which was the second to last boss, because the last boss was actually Piety. It was the very last boss. Your character would have like 4,000 HP, and those rocks, they would hit you for like 3k. And there's just no way to mitigate them, and there's no way to do anything. All you have to do is pray to fucking Kuduku that you don't just get double blasted and instantly die. And that was like the game, you know? So life was pretty different back then.
Like, was anything, because of the fact that you could just go resume the boss from where you left off.
And
whereas
even
now
then, I only played hardcore,
that,
which was dumb, very stupid.
You have to start the boss again. That's enough of a penalty in itself. So that's fine. We don't need the X penalty anymore. But the one question is, what about in maps? And I don't necessarily think that the X penalty is that important in early end game, but I think in late end game it actually is very important. And that's because you need to, in order to have some kind of challenge to get to make it challenging to get to level 100, you need to have something that's kind of going to make it like effectively a build check, as it were, to make sure that you actually have survivability in your build. And so the X penalty is what makes that allowed to happen. So we definitely need to have an X penalty towards the very end of the game. So I'm not exactly sure what we're going to be doing to sort of kick that in exactly yet. But there'll be some kind of kick in of X penalty towards the later end game to sort of make it so that you still have to actually have a survivable build to get to level 100.
The next question I have, I'll just read it as it was asked, but I do know there's a bit more to it, so I'll add on it a little bit. So the question was, how do we interact with flasks, and how many flask slots do we have? I know it's been announced that the flasks kind of will not recover from normal monsters and will be kind of in a way replacing guard skills. So do you have maybe a bit more to add about that?
So basically the philosophy there, so just to talk a little bit about why we did that, so to have it so that so only blues and above monsters will actually recover life.
This is what I was talking about earlier, where I said that presumably they're going to be replacing a lot of the defensive utility with just clicking flasks, right?
Life flasks, because there wasn't enough state in Path of Exile 1, in my opinion, with regard to your character. And what I mean by that is, and this actually, which one was it? I'm talking about Final Fantasy 13, I think it was. Was that the one? I think it was Final Fantasy 13.
With the ladies?
Which is a game I hated. The reason I didn't like it was because your character, you effectively, every time, every time you finished a battle in that game, your character was reset to full life. What that meant was, is that there were really no resources, like there was no feeling of like if you fight a group of 5 monsters and you fight the same group of 5 monsters again, it's literally always exactly the same fight, because there's no resource that carries on between the fights.
Sure.
And that was a thing that made me really dislike that game, because it just felt very grindy, because there was no sort of feeling of tension of like getting like in previous games in that series, there was this feeling of like you leave town, you kind of have this like your health is kind of slowly decreasing as you sort of go through the game, and then eventually you run out of resources and you have to go back. And while I don't necessarily want it to be that you're always going to run out of flask charges in PoE2, that is not the case. I do want it to be that it isn't just that you're always on full flask charges, because the flasks have to kind of on some level the flasks are really your health bar. You can recover your life in PoE very, very quickly. And so it's really your flask state that is kind of the main state of your character. And so, yeah, like that is something that I kind of want to make still be the case. Now, there's going to be things like leech and so on that's going to allow you to solve those problems that not, like without necessarily using flasks. And then, of course, towards the end game, you're going to be replacing some of your flasks with other things and so on. But I do think that it is important that you don't just feel like every time I kill a pack, I get all of my life flasks, my flask charges back. As for guard flasks and things like that, flasks are a nice like resource limiting mechanic that we can use to allow for things where we don't want to have a cooldown, but we do want to have something that you use on occasion. And I think the tension between life, mana, and what other resource that you have is pretty good.
I mean, also just even misclicking a flask, double clicking a flask should feel bad. The same way that like in current PoE, if you're using Flame Dash, your first cast is instant, but the second one has got a cast time. So if you double click it, it's a problem. It's like, it should be, in my eyes, it should be a tangible resource for sure.
But at the same time, we don't want to kind of be flask piano where you're just like constantly, just constantly using them. So ideally, they kind of get to a point where you use them in the right circumstance, you don't use them otherwise, and there's some interesting tension there. And they can serve as a nice resource mechanic that all players have access to, that you can kind of choose, like what you want to use there. So
the problem that I have with this is the same problem that I used to run into with old PoE and with current PoE to a certain extent, is that if you are balancing around like limited use around the entire course of a fight, you have to make them so impactful that because of the way that different people will differently scale defenses, those flasks would make you practically immune. In early Path of Exile, flasks were very difficult to recover, but a granite flask would give you 10,000 armor. Just base, 10,000 armor. And things didn't hit that hard. So 10,000 armor essentially made you completely immune to physical damage. And you could extend this to something like Molten Shell, right? Where if you, for many years in PoE, and you could argue currently too, if you just wanted to be immune on a character that built around defenses, you just click your Molten Shell and you just can't die. And so it's very difficult to make the system where it feels like something that is rewarding enough to be pressed and played around correctly, but also not something that allows you to trivialize content. And as the game continues to grow in speed and power creep and everything, that short window essentially becomes longer if you're shortening the fight, and then it's resulting in the same situation that you had before, and now you're having to like adjust everything all over again. I feel like for a game like Path of Exile, if you want to stick with the flasks and not have some sort of cooldown system, even though from the sounds of it, flasks are going to be like a cooldown system, because you're going to be building up flasks based off of like the amount of HP that a boss is losing. There's just never going to be a way to like do this without like all of those downsides. But I do think that having it be instant and having it be like dramatically more reactive, considering the new game where you can't just leave a fight and it is very difficult to reset fights, and if you die it like fully resets, I think yeah, you're gonna have to juice it. But maybe they're just gonna bring like, they've kind of tried it already, right? Maybe they're just going to bring like the amount of defenses that you can build on a character a lot closer together across the board. So the differences between like a character having 10,000 armor and a character having 40,000 armor isn't going to be nearly as vast. They kind of tried to do that across the board by making Grace and Determination the way that it is and really never actually addressing or nerfing it. They just wanted like a low investment baseline that just about everybody would specialize into due to how efficient it is, despite the fact that it didn't give you any damage. So they can do that, but you've got endurance charges, you've got PDR, you've got fortify, you've got less damage taken, you've got damage taken as elemental, increased resistances. Now you have like all these things, and would you really want to be removing those tools of allowing somebody to specialize their character further for the sake of like normalizing defenses across the board to make your flask system work. It's like gimping itemization for the purpose of this is like I don't think that's exactly the right solution. So I think they're just, I mean, I don't know. I wonder if they're gonna have like something that seems more long-term and like good. Because yeah, this just sounds like another cooldown system. And as much as I like cooldowns for damage, if done well, and you've got skills that aren't on cooldown most of the time to deal damage, and you've got cooldown skills that improve your character's whatever situationally, yeah, for defenses, I would never want like permanent flasks or permanent molten shell to be a thing ever again. I really just don't. Because it's just too game breaking, you know? I still feel like Ruthless Flask System is better than normal PoE if you got 40% base MS or remove Quicksilver. But the way it is right now, it literally makes the Ruthless bad. Yeah, for sure. I mean, Ruthless Flasks are pretty much like what old PoE flasks are. Not really, but in the way that it works in reality, yeah. I like PoE flasks. I really do. And I thought that there were periods in time where it did work, especially in the early periods of time. But unless it's something that you always take for granted, nowadays, I don't know if I can point to situations where it's something good. But it's so much character power and everything, and it's so iconic. I don't see how you could ever take it away. I guess it's just gonna be one of those things where, you know, PoE overlay needs to look, UI needs to look the way that it does, and flasks just always have to be there, and it's an ARPG. That's how they did it in Diablo 2, so we're gonna do it like that in PoE forever. I don't know, I wonder. What if flasks are offensive, aversive, or sustain? I would personally prefer that. I like reactive things. Not like for everything to be reactive, but defenses, I really like to be able to see that I messed up and like recover from that, you know? That's why my idea for stun recovery was that there would be attacks that would inherently indicate that you are going to get stunned. So any attack wouldn't be able to stun you, but a big like overhead swing, you know, with a highlighted weapon attack would. It wouldn't do a lot of damage, but you would get stunned. And now you use the new dodge roll to get back up and react to that. Because if you stay on the ground, you're gonna die. So you have to react by getting your character back up. And you can do like indicators and stuff like that. Just as an example, like the way that it is in Lost Ark, for instance, right? So you have to react. So something like that, being offensive or reactive, I would appreciate it a lot more. Because just rotating flasks and piano, I don't know. It never has worked, and it's progressively gotten worse. And eventually we've gotten the band-aid that we have nowadays, which is you invest enough into your flasks, you just never really press them, you know? You just forget about them. I mean, for a lot of people, they don't even run like a life flask, you know, depending on the build that they're going to be doing. So I never want to be like clicking to become immune. I want to be clicking to either deal more damage, yeah, or respond to something that's happening on the screen. Otherwise, yeah, it's not really gonna work. So I would probably like that the most, you know? Biggest offender is instant life flask right now. Yeah. I mean, that just, the instant life flask embossing and just spamming flasks and whatever, it's a perfect showcase of why the system overall just has as many flaws as it does, because that one is like the big alarm there for sure.
Hopefully that kind of gives you some idea, unless you've got any other questions about any of that sort of like kind of basic philosophy around flasks.
Personally, no. I'm kind of curious to see what you guys come up with in the final design of it. I think
piano is never coming back. Not really.
There's so many factors that come together to like a feel-good flask system. That's really difficult for me to say. I like it because of A, right? It's just the whole thing has to kind of have a good feel to it.
If I'm being real with you, I can foresee like tinctures and the way that tinctures work in this league in PoE, and like especially in terms of character power, to be a lot more likely than something like pianoing coming back, like straight up. I can see just, yeah, I mean, Tincture's making a lot more sense in that sense. I mean, obviously not based off of like the other flasks or whatever, but maybe. I mean, always existing, always giving you something, not really something that you're going to want to worry about long term, you know?
Right. But I will say that not having charges come from normal monsters was an instant game feel upgrade, in my opinion, like when we made that change. And
yeah,
surprisingly, we didn't, like, I thought we would have to buff the amount of flash charges that monsters gave, the ones that do give charges in response to that. And then we just didn't, and it seemed to be fine. So that might not be entirely accurate, but yeah, it didn't take much to actually make that change work well, as it turned out.
Okay.
The biggest issue actually was just really early game before you have very many blue and yellow monsters.
Mm-hmm.
Because you weren't getting enough charges there. So that's when we made it so that checkpoints give you charges, and that kind of resolved the issue, plus a bit of tweaking about early game flasks.
Checkpoints?
Like the pool size and a few other details like that, and we kind of managed to get it to feel pretty good, I think.
Interesting.
All right. So a question here is about like casual group play. It said that other ARPGs in the genre generally do it pretty well, but in PoE it felt punishing to play with another.
Okay, hold on. What ARPG does group play well? To the point where like group play isn't pretty much mandatory. Because it's not Diablo 3 or Diablo 4 or Diablo 2. It's not Last Epoch. It's not Grim Dawn. I mean, I guess you could argue Grim Dawn, actually. You could argue Grim Dawn. To a certain extent. But that's probably, like, the best example. Some people say Lost Ark. You guys are cooked. Lost Ark is a fucking MMORPG. Titan Quest. I mean, to be fair, I haven't played Titan Quest with other people. Dungeon Siege? I mean, Dungeon Siege does do really well. But you would also not argue that it's not an ARPG. Basically, like, the way to make group play feel good is if group play... It's like the Diablo thing, you know? Group play is just 4 times better than solo play for, like, Diablo 4 or Diablo 3. It's just that. It's like, oh, extra player? Double the power. Like, that's the way to do it. It's even more ridiculous. I mean, in Diablo 4 and Diablo 3, it wasn't like every player was double. Not only would you get more loot by like a substantial margin across the board, but also now you're running content like infinity times better. So I don't know. Making group play more viable typically results in just making group play overpowered, and I don't think that's good. It's one of the things that I really love about PoE, that I used to hate about it, actually. As a matter of fact, because a lot of people don't even remember this, but Path of Exile used to be a strictly group play experience for a very long time, for many, many years. Prior to the invention of hardcore, invention of SSF, and things like really changing in the game, the way that you would play before would be you would have a map wielder, you know, you would have the person with the maps, and then everybody would give currency to the map person, and the map person would spend exalted orbs, divines, juice the map up as much as possible, get it real hella pumped up. Because map sustain was just that bad that the only way that you could do that was to roll these insane maps. And then you guys would all run that map together and you would get the XP. The map person would hopefully drop a map. And then you guys would take that map, give that person a bunch of currency, and they would roll it again. And that's how you mapped. And so you can imagine...
Just resubscribed for 107 months.
Cuzo. Thank you very much, man. Thank you, Cuzo. And you can imagine that wasn't very good for solo play whatsoever, right? Because if you were a solo player, you just didn't have maps. Like, that's it. So if you were somebody like me who really liked solo play, you just didn't get to play. That's part of the reason why I played builds like SRS and Phase Breakers, is because I would be able to solo maps, put 10 divines, well, nowadays, back then it was like Exalted Orbs, into like my maps, drop a 78 courtyard, which was the highest tier, and then sell that bitch for like 12 exalted orbs, okay? And then sometimes I wouldn't drop a map, and then that would be it. I would be bricked. I would be done. Like, the league's over for me, because now I have no maps. It's over. It was crazy. It was a completely different time. And yeah, making it so that one, SSF was a viable way to play, and two, so that map sustain became a real thing for individual players, and you wouldn't just have to pour all this currency, and essentially like you would have to farm currency on your own with no maps and running like level 70 maps. Actually, not even level 70, because back then the lowest tier maps were 66. So really, level 70 maps were kind of high tier maps already. So you'd be running like 66s and 67s, farm up a little bit of currency, group up with your buddies. There would be somebody who would have the world famous 76 map, or some later on 78. Oh my god, a palace. You have a 78 palace? Holy shit, dude. Don't tell the neighbors, they're gonna come and yoink it. And then, yeah, you guys would just pour currency into him and run it. And you'd be divining it over and over and exalting and removing all the mods because you don't have maze. And it'd be just like this insane thing. And surprise, it didn't make for a fantastic experience for solo players. So I know what PoE can be like if group play is like mandatory or so much better than solo play. And really, I don't want it back at all, man.
Per person is the question that I found online. So I'm kind of curious if PoE2 will kind of address.
Map sustain was so bad that me and Gucci would play together on like 400 ping. Man's from Singapore. I'm from Polando, dude. I mean, to be fair, it did make us meet people, you know? We would actually like play together and everything. I'd be playing with people from like Australia and shit, like Yovu and RaizQT and all those guys. Like, what the hell? Crazy times, dude.
Kind of like casual play with other people in ways that PoE1 doesn't, perhaps.
I hate people.
Well, there is a few things we have going on there, but I don't really want to announce any of that right now, unfortunately. But I'm curious to know what the punishing thing is actually referring to. With that, because I don't know that I feel like I am aware
I've been
about
SSF
that issue.
for like 4 years personally, so yes, I don't have much input on this either.
Maybe I'm just terribly misinformed about this, but
Calm down, Grandpa. You calm down. I think what Kripp is asking from someone else is more about how group play feels in gameplay in other games versus PoE. Because the PoE, for me, the visual clutter and not instant loot for each player turns it off for me. I mean, the non-instance loot, I think, overall is just better. But it is a little bit of a relic of the past, because this is another thing that people don't remember. Loot used to not be allocated to players. And I think that option still exists, that you can set it up as free-for-all. I mean, of course, it still exists. But that was like the baseline. So if you were doing farming piety, and piety dropped an exalted orb, whoever got that shit first, it was theirs. That's it. Click faster, get loot, dude. You're playing on ping? Well, too bad, baby dick. You're not gonna get any loot, lol. So I think that the way that it is now is probably in some part due to the fact that the loot allocation and whatever was something that GGG was actually vehemently against. Like, they really didn't like it. They didn't want any of it. And Chris would repeatedly say, like, no, we want people to fight over loot like in Diablo 2. And eventually they were like, okay, everybody's raging about this. We have to implement a band-aid. And that's where loot allocation came from. So I'm sure that they could do instance loot in some way. I feel like there's already been examples of that in PoE. I mean, they can probably add a filter option that's like, if loot isn't allocated to you, you just can't see it, right? It would mess with the way that like things spawn on the ground and whatnot, but otherwise, should be kind of okay, you know? Play with people you don't want to share loot with? No, I mean, I think so too. That's just kind of the standard for PoE nowadays anyway. I feel like you would be running free for all if you're playing with friends. Do people actually use like, what even is it? It's like public parties. I mean, this used to be a legitimate way of playing the game, you know? Not a whole lot of public parties. Hardcore? Are there public parties in softcore? I don't know. Yeah, like how many? Like a lot? Ad parties? Yeah, isn't it just like a bunch of people advertising RMT? Yes, too. I mean, for me, yeah, there you go. I don't know. Either way, I understand what the question is. It's not even from like a... It's just from an enjoyment point of view. But again, if you're not going to feel appropriately rewarded for what you're doing compared to like the solo play, a lot of times you're going to be discouraged from playing with friends, even if you are having fun. And that's going to be something that PoE is always going to struggle with. In some leagues, it's going to be bussin'. In some other leagues, not so much. I think overall, it's in a pretty good state for the game that PoE is. It's kind of a miracle that it is in a as good of a state as it is.
I guess I'm not aware of the being punishing to play with another person in particular. I mean, sure, the life increases, but you know, you've got more people. I don't know that. I guess I don't know what that's referring to. So
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a question about a character preview with MTX being ported over and its own MTX. Path of Exile 1, you just kind of have to impractically zoom on your character to fully appreciate it.
This is something that we intend to address, and you should note that because the MTX store is the same in PoE 1 and 2, that any changes we do make to the MTX store will be in PoE 1 as well, because they'll have the same shop. So yeah, it's something that I definitely hear. We would like to have MTX preview. We are working on it, and you know, we will hopefully get there before too long.
You guys think an MTX preview would increase or decrease the amount of sales that they're going to have in the store? I feel like a preview would absolutely decrease the amount of people buying like shit. I think they're definitely gonna be like, yeah, I don't know. I feel like there's been so many MTXs that I've bought, and then I put them on my character, and I'm like, this looks nothing like what I imagined it. But at least at this case, like in this case, you would actually be able to see prior to buying, so it would decrease it, no? There's a pretty big split between increase and decrease. I feel like if you can preview stuff, it definitely hurts sales. I mean, you can still refund, yeah, but you have to go through like a whole process and everything, you know? Decrease regret purchases. Yeah, I think overall, even if it decreased the amount of people purchasing, it would be an overall benefit, like long term. Well, I guess that doesn't really work because it would even out, right? I guess the customers that would be purchasing would be happier. And that's probably more important than somebody who wouldn't have spent money will now not spend money anyway. But then again, they have the support. The supporter packs are so good. Everybody's always got points to spend on something, you know? Gonna have to bait them into buying some bullshit. I don't know. That's gotta be a tricky business decision. I don't envy him in this one. But they could just say forever, like, oh yeah, it's in the works. It's in the works. One day, guys, for sure.
Yes, I agree. It's something that we really should have. But I will note that while it's easy for certain things, it is quite hard for others, especially with the complexity around the MTXs these days. So yeah, there's quite a lot of work to do there.
True, that is true.
Intending to do that.
PoE does have a much more complex MTXs than a lot of other games. For a lot of other games, it's like, oh, you have a bandana now, and then you have a dragon pet or whatever. But in PoE now, it's like, if you find 3 coins while there are 3 crows flying above you, there's a plant growing out of your ass, and that plant actually counts the amount of chaos orbs that you pick up from the ground and put in your stat. It's like, there's like all these different rule sets for things happening whenever something else is happening. And then sometimes you need multiple effects of it, essentially, is what I'm trying to say. That I can see how there could be an issue with some of the display stuff and people could still regret purchasing something because they don't think that it's conditional and then it actually just is. The surfboard is wild. The surfboard, I'll say it. The surfboard is worse than the Razer footprints. I said it. What's wrong with that surfboard, dude? How do they think that that's a good addition to the game? Really? This. I don't even know if I can use it because my character's already flying. This. Wait, I can use this and the, the flying thing? What the hell? What the hell?
That works. So I'm hoping we'll be able to get that one before too long.
All
It's
right.
a tribute to you. Stop.
Now, this question doesn't have quite that much meaning to me, but when I opened up
Fuck
the
you, fuck
floor
you.
to Twitch chat to ask
breaking
the
my
questions,
immersion.
the one that was spammed like crazy was cross-save/cross-platform play ? So maybe you can do them a favor and give them some insight.
I really do want to talk about this, but our console stuff, we kind of haven't really talked about this yet. But suffice to say, PoE2 will be a much better experience on console than PoE1 was, and take
Maybe.
that answer for what you will. But we're going to be talking a lot more
He
about
knows.
those
Does
details
he know?
before too long.
I think he
when we
knows.
talk about what we've got going on console.
With console play being part of the mindfulness of the project, let's say, what might people expect for hardware requirements? Are the ones listed on the Steam page still about right?
I believe that the Steam Path of Exile 2, the Path of Exile 2 Steam page, which you can go to and wishlist, by the way, just to quickly plug that, should be correct.
Twitch Prime.
So I believe that's what
Twitch Prime in the chat
960
to
is the
confirm
is the
that you
lowest,
heard that chat.
That's NVIDIA 960 is the lowest. The
Very
most
cool.
amazing experience ever on that card, but I believe that's what we have as our sort of minimum requirement there.
All right. What is your stance on builds that require 10 plus uniques to function? And for the example they gave us the Golemancer, so I guess we're including jewels in this list of 10.
I mean, there should absolutely be builds like that, but ideally, most builds have some combination of rares and uniques. It would be my opinion. But I mean, yeah, like that kind of thing can happen, right? You want some builds to be expensive and some to be cheap. That's just absolutely a factor. So yeah, there should be some expensive builds out there.
Hey, 960 is a good graphics card. Shut up.
Question: how can we get a beta key for PoE2?
So we haven't officially announced that yet, but if you look at the 3.0 beta,
What do you mean? No way, PoE runs on a 960. I was playing PoE on a 960 and streaming on one machine until like 3 years ago or something. Shut up. You don't even know, brother. Okay. I mean, to be fair, people are saying that it's getting worse now. And to be fair, also, my latency, my ping wasn't perfect. All that. So I don't. Yeah. Hadn't seen COVID yet 3 years ago. I mean, that's what it was doing, though. Was that? When did the? I think so. I think it's been that old.
you should
It's
expect something
chunky.
very
My
similar.
980 these days.
Okay.
Yeah, but okay. 960 is a better graphics card than a 980 for PoE. Board, like, no doubt about that. I don't care how much 980 is supposed to be better. 960 works better because the difference is PoE was always optimized for a 960 and they never gave a fuck about a 980. Okay, that's what it is. I'm telling you. God damn it, I'm out of water again. This is literally no clue. I actually have no idea. Are you guys even fucking listening to me? All I know, it was pretty good, honestly. And I do remember people complaining about 980s. But I definitely have never complained about my 960. Ever.
About the rearrangement of
Not even one time.
UI pieces, will there be an option to
I
drag
did do
buffs
Ubers today,
and debuffs
too.
around, I guess, for personal customization, clarity type of thing?
I know our UX guy was kind of keen on this, which is possibly what we might potentially allow that. There's sort of various updates to how that stuff works. I guess I'm sort of mostly fine with that. It's probably not that hard to implement, so it's something we could probably do. But I don't want to promise it immediately, just
To
because
shapers, that's
I'd have to kind of
Ubers.
like do a bit more exploration of it. But our UX guy was kind of keen for something like that.
Okay. So I have a pretty long question here.
I'd have to very
Did he actually say
the
that?
rearrangement of UI pieces.
beta. You should
Say it
expect something very
again.
similar.
I want to hear it again.
Okay. About the rearrangement of UI pieces, will there be an option to drag buffs and debuffs around, I guess for personal customization, clarity type of thing?
Beep.
I know our UX guy was kind of keen on this, which is possibly what we might potentially allow that. There's sort of various updates to how that
You
stuff
have
works.
to, I beg.
I guess I'm sort of mostly fine with that. It's probably not that hard to implement, so it's something we could probably do. But I don't want to promise it immediately, just because I'd have to
Promise it, Jonathan. It's been years of me begging. I've been begging you. I've been DMing D-Negs on Discord. Was that his Discord name? I think so. I'm pretty sure that was it. Wait, no, it's a different guy. Wait, no, it is that guy. Wait, what is this? Who the hell? Who the hell is this? Huh? But yeah, Raiz Leaker. No, you guys know his name because he's been leaking his name all over the Discord. Anyway, this has been like consistently my biggest point of feedback. I mean, in general, being able to modify the UI. But like, I don't even need it to be like really, really big. Just buffs and debuffs, especially debuffs. Okay, I would like to rearrange more things, you know? But, you know, it would be a great start.
kind of like do a bit more exploration of it. But
Yeah, I wouldn't want it to be like WoW. But I would like to be able to put like certain buffs and certain debuffs just like right here, you know? Just like if I'm doing this and there's a spirit offering, just give me a counter like right here or fucking anywhere. Fucking make it count. Give me a number. Anywhere. Okay?
I was kind of keen for something like that.
Okay.
Let me do it.
So I have a pretty long question here. I'm just trying to understand it, to summarize it a bit. But I guess the question is, how much will you be able to kind of customize an encounter, like, for example, a map, to kind of be something your character can take on? Like, let's say if it's a map with a difficult boss where he'd scale like lightning damage, you wouldn't want to do like a minus max resists in PoE1, for example. You have that layer of customizability to curb the challenge. Right. Is something like that going to exist in PoE2? There
will definitely be ways to customize. Like in PoE1, there will definitely be things you can do to customize maps. As a starting point, of course, there's just map mods, right? Like just the mod that are on the map, and that's still there and still works largely the same way. Although there will be a lot of the particulars will change a lot as far as like the exact mods and everything like that, and the way that the rewards of it scale and this kind of thing. There will also need to be a system that won't be the Atlas tree, like it won't be the same as the Atlas tree, but certainly there needs to be other sources of mods that maps can get in some fashion, and that will come down to the design of the in-game system, which we haven't talked about yet. But effectively, there will need to be things like that. So hopefully that kind of answers the question about that. But effectively, there'll be the same sort of things you can expect from here, like from PoE1 and in-game, where you can customize maps basically.
Okay, good.
With mods and stuff.
So a question here about the flask system once again. Is there a chance that refilling flasks at wells will be revisited if players don't like it? And maybe I can actually add a little bit of input on this. So in Ruthless, this is how it works. And what I did in my hideout is I put the NPC that refills flasks right next to the portal I normally take when I enter the map. So it's literally like one extra click for me, to the point where, yeah, it doesn't really seem super worth it to have that as a mechanic because you trivialize it anyway. What do you think?
So this is one of those funny little things where...
Is it funny though?
Like...
I'm not laughing.
It may not seem to matter that much. There's just a tiny little extra bit of making the town cycle feel
Explain
like
it to
it
me,
has
Jonathan.
some purpose. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
I do appreciate the fact that in Ruthless, like, sure. I mean, the fact that you can move stuff around in your hideout kind of just means that it ends up in endgame being mostly trivialized. And maybe what
Right.
that actually means is that for hideouts, we make it so that it works a little bit different, and like it just refills your flasks automatically while there or something like that.
Crip
But it was just
snitching.
kind of like just during the campaign though, it just kind of has the slight feeling of like like makes the world feel a little bit more kind of like I guess it just you want a bit of physicality to some of these things in some cases.
Okay.
I don't think that once you've kind of done it a little bit in PoE2, it doesn't feel particularly wrong at all. We've made sure to place the wells pretty close to where the portals are and this kind of thing. But I mean, look, at the end of the day, we're not in the business of like making people hate us for no reason, right? Like if everyone's really, really, really hating it constantly, then I guess we would change it. But at the same time, I hope people are just...
I thought he's gonna have the Basato answer and say we're not really in the business of making people like us. He's just gotta take the different route, but no. I mean, it makes sense. I do think that this is one of those things that they should believe in themselves, even though I don't like it.
just fine with it, and it won't be a particular issue when you actually play with it in practice.
All right, excellent. Well, that is my list of questions, and I did kind of go through chat. I know some people still had their own question, but in many cases, I feel like I've, in a way, interpreted in a different question. So I think this is a good point to kind of put an end to it. An hour and a half, I think, is a digestible format still for most people anticipating Path of Exile and Path of Exile 2. So perhaps we can end on a note. Thank you so much for joining us, and perhaps you can mention when we might expect the next big announcement for PoE2 updates or any tidbit of news coming up.
So I don't have any particular date, but I wouldn't think it would be too far into next year when we would be announcing some more stuff. We've got a huge amount of announcements to do next year. We probably need to get started fairly early.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Jonathan. I hope it's been a good experience for you, and I hope chat has enjoyed it as well. We'll get this up for you guys to watch on VOD format. And if you have any questions, I've seen outside of this interview, I've seen Jonathan personally reply to many people's questions on the PoE2 subreddit. So he's very active in the community. If you have any follow-up questions, just throw it out there. There's actually a pretty good chance Jonathan's eyes will hit it.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care. See you later.
Wow.
Right, guys, that is gonna do it.
That was crazy. That really was very enjoyable. Here you guys go. Here's the VOD. Always super nice to listen to Jonathan, especially when it is things that it's not just a matter of like, I disagree with this or I agree with that. There's actual ideas and explanations that he goes into that I think will long-term benefit Path of Exile, even though it's not always things that you want to be hearing in regards to PoE1 or PoE2 or whatever. It's not always super clear cut either. There's a lot of room for interpretation. It's always super nice to have GGG, especially the higher ups and everything, communicating in a somewhat more concrete fashion. There is a PoE2 Reddit. I just found out. Let's check it out. PoE2 Reddit. Wondering Chris's whereabouts. He's like behind the curtain since ExileCon. Chris is around, but Chris is the PoE1 guy,